Chapter 676. In the mirror dimension space. Most people were still paying attention to Thanos outside, and only Spider-Man, Peter, seemed to be aware of something. He looked curiously at the king, who was drawing circles with his hands again, and cried out curiously, "Uncle, what are you doing?" The others heard Spider-Man's voice and looked back at the king, only then did they notice the king's strange behavior. He was trying to open the magic portal to the outside world. "Quick, stop me." The king's face was very ugly at this time, and he slightly got rid of the shackles through his powerful mind, but he still couldn't control his hands, and little by little, he drew a whole circle in the void. A little spark appeared in the air in front of him, and then the magic portal took shape and expanded little by little. His mind is controlled by Thanos. Scarlet Witch spoke hurriedly, but she, who had just gone through a great battle, couldn't cast her mind-shielding ability in time. Even if she could barely cast it, it would be difficult to stop Thanos's mind control through the Infinity Glove. In other words, no one can defeat Thanos in the Mind Domain, who has the Mind Stone at this time. Every Infinity Stone is the cornerstone of the Marvel Universe itself, and it is the pinnacle of all levels of energy and talent. Its existence represents the will of the Marvel Universe. The Reality Stone rewrites illusion reality, the Mind Stone controls the mind of all things, and the Soul Stone controls the soul of the universe. With these three Infinity Stones, Thanos is now in a semi-invincible state in the entire universe. Finally, before the king completely opened the magic portal, Iron Man and War Machine quickly took action, and the two of them, one on the left and one on the right, pulled the king's arms apart, forcing him to cancel the spell. Spider-Man shot a ball of spider web, entangling the hanging ring on the king's hand, preventing him from casting again. The spark ignited in the air, and the portal opened was only the size of a fist. After the king's spell was interrupted, the portal gradually shrank and extinguished. The crisis was lifted. Without waiting for the people in the mirror dimension space to breathe a sigh of relief, a big hand wearing the Infinity Glove was inserted into the portal from the outside world like lightning. Thanos seized this fleeting opportunity, and as his big hand forcibly pulled, the boundary wall of the mirror dimension space was gradually torn outward like glass, and the space hole was constantly expanding. "Don't let him in. Let's attack together," Iron Man shouted, and the engines in his hands were raised, and a bright laser beam shot towards the big hand. The War Machine also opened the cannonball device on its back and used its strongest attack weapon to fire a few small missiles at Thanos's large hand. There's also Scarlet Witch's energy strike, Spider-Man's spiderweb. Regardless of whether the heroes had extra strength or not, all of them took action at this time. They did not care about anything else and launched a fierce attack at the giant hand that tore through space. Everyone knew what the consequences would be once Thanos was allowed to enter. However, in the face of everyone's collective attacks, the Infinity Glove was held up once again. All the attacks stopped an inch away from the glove, as if they were stopped by the laws of the universe. Under everyone's astonished gazes, the three oars inlaid on the Infinity Glove shone brilliantly at the same time. Then, the attacks that were concentrated on the giant hand were all reversed. Dodge. Everyone was forced to flee or set up defenses. Many people were sent flying by the explosion, and the mirror dimension space was in chaos. Take advantage of this opportunity. Thanos's big hand wearing the Infinity Glove exerted the power of the Infinity Gem and completely tore open a hole enough to pass through. He completely stepped into the mirror dimension space from the outside world. It's over now. Seeing this scene, Eddie, who had no combat power at the moment, smiled bitterly and could only find a corner to hide first. He pressed his right hand against his left chest and urged anxiously in his heart, "Toxin, what's wrong with you? Now it's time for you to take action." Toxin still had no reaction. Since the superpower competition, it seemed to have left Eddie's body. Thanos. Iron Man quickly got up from the ground and looked at Thanos, who had entered the mirror dimension space. The engines on his hands and feet were started at the same time, and he swooped towards Thanos at a low altitude, shooting several energy beams from his hands on the way. Stark. Looking at Iron Man flying towards him, Thanos whispered. He blocked the energy beam with his unprotected right arm, and the infinity glove on his left hand flashed, creating a group of birds out of thin air that flew towards Iron Man. Iron Man's vision and flight were seriously interfered with by the birds, and he could only be forced to slow down, but Thanos grabbed his neck in front of him. Let him go. War Machine shouted and continued to launch small missiles. Thanos didn't even look at him. With a wave of the infinity glove, War Machine and several small missiles all flew out and disappeared into the building next to the mirror dimension space, causing a big explosion. Huh? Thanos glanced at the open space next to him and stimulated the power of the infinity glove. Quicksilver, who was running fast next to him, was blocked by several generated walls. Let go of Mr. Stark. Spider-Man leaped over, and in the air, he turned on the killing mode. Several mechanical claws stretched out from his back like a ferocious steel spider. Slayer Overlord's infinite boxing glove was gently clenched, and Spider-Man stagnated in the air. He had too little experience with the enemy, and he was still a child. His mind was instantly attacked, and then he fell straight to the ground. In a short period of time, 2 or 3 superheroes were defeated one after another, and none of them were able to withstand a single blow from Thanos. Scarlet Witch and King, both of them were unable to make a move because of the rebound attack just now. You can't stop me, Thanos said in a deep voice, and his eyes fell back to Iron Man, who was in front of him and had his neck pinched by his right hand. Iron Man was still struggling, and the palm engine was close by, and he fired a shot at Thanos' chest. With the Titan bloodline, Thanos, who was stronger than Hulk in terms of physique alone, didn't care about these energy attacks at all. His right palm continued to shrink, and the armor on Iron Man's neck began to crack. Let go of me. Iron Man used the engine as power and used his hands, which had transformed into hammers, to hit Thanos' face fiercely. Thanos' nose bled a little, but he ignored it and continued to shrink the fingers of his right hand. The neck of the Iron Man suit shattered inch by inch. Just as Iron Man was about to be crushed to death by Thanos, a figure under the pull of a dark red cloak floated up into the air and transformed into dozens of doppelgangers. Each doppelganger released a golden magic whip, which densely intertwined into a net and firmly entangled Thanos' hands and body together. It was Doctor Strange. The wound on his forehead was still bleeding, but he had finally regained consciousness and stopped Iron Man in time before he was killed. Let him go, the primordial stone of time is with me. Doctor Strange said coldly. I saw it. Thanos stared straight at the magic pendant that Doctor Strange was wearing. There was a faint green light that was exclusive to the primordial stone of time. He let go of Iron Man in his hand and fought against Doctor Strange, who was at full power. This war was not over yet. Chapter 677. At this moment, in the mirror dimension. In the space that replicated the streets of New York City in the real world, Iron Man, Spider-Man, Scarlet Witch, King. Most of the superheroes had lost their ability to fight after a round of powerful bombardment. They were lying around the lawn that had turned into a battlefield. Now, the only one who could keep the origin stone of time was Doctor Strange himself. Doctor Strange seemed to understand this point as well. He directly cast a doppelganger. Dozens of magic whips lengthened like golden light intertwined into a net, tightly wrapping around Thanos, who was wearing the infinity glove. Mage, it's useless. Thanos shook his head lightly. As he continued to tighten his grip on the infinity glove, a ball of flame was released from above his fist and rushed toward the dozens of Doctor Strange floating in the sky in front of him. All the whips and shadows were instantly destroyed by the fire attack. Doctor Strange flew backward, trying to put some distance between them. Where do you think you're going? Come here. Thanos smiled coldly and reached back with his left hand. The area between heaven and earth in front of him automatically pulled forward, and Doctor Strange also approached him. Doctor Strange's expression changed slightly, and he built a temporary magic shield in front of him. Thanos clenched his left hand into a fist, and with the power of the Infinity Glove, he shattered the magic shield with one punch. They were not on the same level. As the only Titan in the universe, Thanos's physical strength was already unparalleled. It was hard to find a match in the universe. With the Infinity Glove and the 3 Infinity Stones, he greatly compensated for the power of the laws. His strength was not on the same level as them. The Infinity Glove sank into Doctor Strange's chest and passed through his body without any hindrance. Thanos raised his eyebrows and watched Doctor Strange's body in front of him turn from solid to illusory. So, it was just a magic clone. Thanos quickly looked up and saw that in the sky, Doctor Strange's real body was drawing circles to open a magic portal and was about to escape to the real world outside. Enough! Thanos raised his foot impatiently and stepped directly on the chest of the Iron Man lying on the ground, causing his body to sink into the grass. The armor, which was already close to its limit, could not bear the burden and started to crack. The magical door leading to the outside world had been opened. The magical cape fluttered in the wind, but Doctor Strange's floating body came to an abrupt stop. "You can run, but I will kill everyone here." Thanos's ugly purple potato-like face was indifferent. He continued to stomp down, causing Iron Man to scream. He glanced at the superheroes who were still on the field. It was the same move again, but it was a tried and tested move. "Thanos, if you dare to do that, you will definitely regret it." Doctor Strange turned around and looked coldly at the invincible yet despicable Thanos. "I have no fear. As long as I can achieve my goal, even if I have to sacrifice myself, so what?" Thanos replied in a low voice as he stared at Doctor Strange. "So, you want to escape with the Origin Stone of Time and struggle a little longer? Or do you want to use the Origin Stone of Time to exchange for the hostages here?" Doctor Strange did not respond. He glanced at the spell portal behind him, then at the superhero in the mirror dimension below, and finally sighed heavily. Such a situation seemed to have been predestined. No matter what, he could not keep the Origin Stone that the Ancient One asked him to protect. After 3 seconds of silence, Doctor Strange said with difficulty, "I will give you the Origin Stone." He used both hands to cast a spell on the necklace in front of his chest. As the necklace clicked open, Origin Stone with a green glow flew out from within. The Origin Stone of Time. The fourth one. Thanos's eyes lit up slightly, and he no longer paid attention to Iron Man on the ground. He stepped forward and walked towards the falling gem. Just as he was about to reach it, a white shadow suddenly rushed in from the spell portal opened by Doctor Strange and intercepted the Origin Stone of Time in the air. "That is?" Doctor Strange's eyes widened in surprise. "Sister Yutong?" The Scarlet Witch, who was lying on the telephone pole, stared blankly at the familiar shadow. The one who intercepted the Origin Stone of Time was Yutong's soul. Due to her surging psychic power, her soul was extremely powerful. Not only would it not collapse easily, but it could even rewrite the trajectory of the real world at will. After Yutong's soul seized the Origin Stone of Time, she rushed towards the spell portal at high speed, but soon stopped in the air. Not far behind her soul, Thanos raised his left hand, holding the Infinity Glove in the air. Her soul and the Origin Stone of Time flashed at the same time. "If it was in the past, I might not have been able to do anything to you. But now, I have these 2 Origin Stones in my hands." Under Thanos's words, no matter how hard she struggled, Yutong's soul was quickly pulled back. "It's over, it's all over." Eddie, who was hiding in the dark, sighed. No one could stop Thanos from getting the 4th Origin Stone. No one could. But at this moment, Thanos suddenly took the initiative to let go of his left hand, allowing Yutong's soul to break free. The members of the Avengers were all stunned. What was going on? Even Yutong's soul couldn't understand for a moment. Just now, her soul was almost torn apart by the power of the Origin Stone. It was impossible to protect the origin stone of time. Of course, this was not Thanos going easy on her. It was because he sensed in advance that on Earth, the existence that was enough to threaten him, had returned. Thanos narrowed his eyes solemnly and slowly turned around. The others followed his gaze and saw that there was a dark gray space fog. Across the universe, who knew how many light years away, a familiar tall figure appeared from it. Boss. Godfather? Boss. Patriarch. Mr. Kale, that figure was like the backbone of Earth, but the moment he appeared, everyone on the scene, who had originally fallen into despair, showed a relieved smile. That man was back. Yes, the person who walked out of the space fog was Kale. They finally succeeded in stalling him and waited for Kale's return before the origin stone of time was taken away. It wasn't just Kale. When he walked out of the fog, Thor, Dr. Banner, Valkyrie, and Lorna. Lorna? Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver couldn't help but call out. It's me. Lorna smiled and then looked coldly at Thanos. You didn't expect it, did you? You asked me to stop the boss, but I brought the boss back ahead of time. Well, since I'm back, it's all right. Kale's words were calm, but they contained endless anger. After returning here, he instantly understood the situation. He didn't expect it. Thanos would be so decisive and take advantage of his absence to directly invade Earth with troops. And he maintained cooperation with Loki and directly obtained the key origin stone of reality. But it was still too late. As long as he defeated Thanos here at this moment. Chapter 678. In the mirror space of New York. Thanos did not make a move after Kale appeared. He knew very well in his heart that in front of Kale, it was not realistic to snatch the infinite rough stone from others. So, Thanos simply looked at Kale peacefully. He looked at this man whose strength was so strong that he could not be considered a human, and was invincible in the Milky Way alliance. Kale also looked at him quietly. Thanos was as he expected. He was very tall and strong, very ugly, with a cracked rectangular face. His body exuded an energy aura that made his body feel throbbing. A long, long time ago, during World War II, the Great Battle of New York, from the moment they came into contact with the rough stone, they had already indirectly fought. Loki, Lorna, and even became each other's pawns. In this century-long secret contest, sometimes Kyle won, sometimes exterminating Tyrant won. It was just that the two of them had never really met so far. Until this moment, it was the first time the two had met. A mountain could not accommodate two tigers. The Marvel Universe could not accommodate two top powerhouses fighting for the rough stone at the same time. I'm a little regretful now. I regret that during the Great Battle of New York, I trusted that trash Loki and did not personally lead the troops. Thanos' gaze fell on the space fog behind Kale. Only the real space rough stone could directly open the fog of the mirror space. In other words, now, Kale had two infinite rough stones in his hands, namely the space rough stone and the power rough stone. If you count the time rough stone that Yutong's soul intercepted, he had 3. There were 6 infinite rough stones in the universe. Now, Kale and Thanos had just divided them equally. The only difference was that Thanos' biggest reliance was the infinite gloves, which could perfectly exert the supreme power of the infinite rough stone. Kale's biggest reliance was the space rough stone, and the Protoss fire energy that he got from drawing cards. The power of the fusion of each other, the double star form. So far, it could be considered a draw. After today, the century-long war that covered the entire Marvel Universe finally came to an end. Do you want to come at me together? Thanos was expressionless as he looked at Thor, Dr. Banner, and the others behind Kale. Now, Kale had another advantage, which was that this was his home ground. Behind him were the Avengers, the Kal country, Wakanda, and other top forces on Earth. Of course. Thor was about to speak but was interrupted by Kale. Thor. All of you, don't do anything. Bring the injured out of the mirror space. Can we let them go? All 3 origin stones are with me. Kale narrowed his eyes and looked at Thanos. Sure. Thanos nodded. He was also a little afraid. The strength of Scarlet Witch, Doctor Strange, Quicksilver, and Thor on the field couldn't be completely ignored. If these people attacked together without fear of death, the outcome of this war would be hard to say. Yes, if it was just Kale alone, even if the other party had 3 origin stones, Thanos still didn't think that Kale could defeat him. We can, Dr. Banner still wanted to say something, but after meeting Kale's calm gaze, he nodded helplessly. Now, more than half of them were injured. If they forced themselves to stay and fight, most of them would only be a burden. Kale would be restrained and unable to safely display his true strength. After Thor and Dr. Banner looked at each other, together with Valkyrie, they lifted Iron Man, King, War Machine, and other heroes who were seriously injured. Doctor Strange fell from the sky to the ground and opened a magic portal to the outside. Thanos and Kale didn't make any more moves. About 10 meters away, they quietly looked at each other. Boss. Yutong's soul floated in front of Kale and handed him the Origin Stone of Time. Kyle took the Primordial Stone of Time in his hand. He looked at Yutong's current posture. He knew very well that this Primordial Stone of Time was something that everyone on Earth had tried their best to keep. It carried a weight that far exceeded its own. Yutong's soul said softly, "My mother and the others are fine, but they are still trapped in Wakanda and can't come here." That's good. Kale nodded gently and said to Yutong's soul, "You can go out too." "No, I want to stay by boss's side." Yutong's soul shook her head fiercely, for fear that Kale would use the power of the Origin Stone to expel her. She simply poured into his body and stayed. Kale whispered, "If you stay in my body and I fail, you will die too." "I know, that's why I want to stay." Yutong said telepathically, "As long as boss is here, even if it's hell, I'm willing to go with you. If it's not for you, I'd rather not even have a soul anymore." During World War II, when Kale rescued her in that dark underground laboratory, her body and mind no longer belonged to her. "Then stay and fight with me." Kale's lips curled up slightly. He didn't let Yutong leave. Yes, a long time ago, since the war in Tokyo, their lives were tied together. Sister. Not far away, Lorna saw this scene and her eyes were hazy with tears. She was happy, sincerely happy for Yutong. "You must win the final victory, I'll wait for you outside." Lorna took one last look at Kale and took the lead to leave through the magic portal. She was afraid that she couldn't help but want to stay. The Iron Man armor covering his body was all removed. Tawny was supported by Dr. Banner and Spider-Man, one on the left and one on the right. He looked back with difficulty. "Godfather, you must win." "Of course, when have you ever seen me lose?" Kale showed a confident smile. If he wins today, Tawny's tragic fate of dying as Iron Man will also be reversed and ended. That's good. Tawny believed in his godfather, so he followed Dr. Banner and Spider-Man out of the mirror dimension. "Boss, kill him." Eddie's words were concise as he helped Quicksilver out. Then Doctor Strange, King, Valkyrie, Thor. Everyone left the mirror dimension one after another. Scarlet Witch looked at Kale's back. For some reason, she suddenly had a strong premonition that she would never see the man in front of her again. This premonition made her heart ache violently, and she suddenly broke away from Valkyrie's support. Her body, which had recovered a little strength, turned around and rushed behind Kale, hugging his waist tightly with both hands. "Wanda?" Kale lowered his head in surprise. "This is a hug for Sister Yutong, don't get me wrong." Wanda bit her lip tightly and cried, "Remember. There are many people here waiting for you. Me, Lucy, Sakuragi. We are all outside, waiting for you to win the final victory and come back to us. Don't worry." Kale patted her hands, his eyes condensed with unprecedented firmness, and responded calmly, I will win. I will definitely come back to you. I believe in you. Wanda left. After she left, the magic portal disappeared, and only Thanos and Kale were left in the huge mirror dimension. Sorry to keep you waiting. Kale looked forward. It's just goodbye. For the victory of this battle, before I came here, I also said goodbye to the most important people in my life. It's a farewell. The sadness on Thanos's face disappeared, and then he clenched his left fist, and the 3 inlaid raw stones shone brightly. Come on. Let this war come to an end here. Chapter 679. Only Thanos and Kale were left facing each other in the mirror dimension. Venom. Without any hesitation, Kale directly pulled out the Venom creature card and entered the symbiotic mode to strengthen his physique. Venom could still only increase his physique by 20%. Although 20% was a small amount, coupled with Kale's current divine body, he could basically ignore energy bombardment. Physical damage resistance was measured by stellar level. Then, colorful flames burned on the surface of Kale's body, enveloping his tall and perfect body, making his already powerful aura several times stronger. His spirit and body reached the peak of a critical point. Double star form. Since the opponent was Thanos who had the Infinity Glove, Kale did not use any fancy tricks. Other means were too weak, so he simply used his strongest 2 modes. Amazing, what an amazing junior. Thanos narrowed his eyes solemnly. Kale's aura in front of him had surpassed and suppressed him, who had been conquering the universe for many years. Judging from the genetic potential of humans and titans, he was completely defeated. If it was before I got the Infinity Glove, I might not have been able to defeat you. Perhaps I really can't beat you. Unfortunately, you're still 1 step too late. As soon as he finished speaking, Thanos suddenly stretched out his left hand and grabbed a handful of air with the Infinity Glove. The next moment, around Kale's body and even above his head, a very thick special steel plate suddenly appeared, wrapping him like dumpling filling and quickly collapsing into a ball. Thanos's expression changed slightly. He quickly noticed that Kale was no longer in the square box that had shrunk into a ball. Instead, he came to his back. This punch is for the Avengers. The fist burning with flames landed on Thanos's back. The armor on his body immediately cracked and a fist mark appeared. He was blasted hundreds of meters away, smashing through 3 buildings in the mirror dimension, leaving a hole in the center. Wah! Thanos flew out of the wall of the last building, bringing along a pile of rubble and dust. Before he could react, Kale, who had turned into a light figure, appeared behind him and kicked his body back in the direction he came from. This kick is for Wakanda's people. Rumble. The 3 buildings that Thanos had punched back and forth were clearly made of reinforced concrete, but now they were as fragile as plastic and collapsed with a sad sound. This was just the beginning. From the moment Kale attacked, Thanos's body was always in the air and did not fall to the ground. He was punched into the sky above New York streets, and was kicked to the end of the square. This punch is for Yutong, this kick is for the Cow country. Kale could not see the movement trajectory at all. No matter where Thanos was thrown, Kale would appear behind him in the next moment and continue to give him a powerful blow. Flying around New York like a volleyball, in just half a minute, Thanos suffered countless blows. The super-hard alien armor on his body had already been shattered by Kale's hands and feet. Once again, he was thrown high up 100 meters high. Just as Kyle flashed, he appeared behind Thanos' Overlord. He had just thrown a punch with all his strength, but this time, it was caught by Thanos' Overlord's right hand. The big purple hand tightly wrapped around the flaming fist. Sure enough, that's right. Thanos' mouth was dripping with blood. He turned around and stared at Kale behind him. That's not because you're too fast, but because you borrowed the power of the dimensional stone. That's why you're so fast that I can't react in time. Did you just notice? Kale looked up coldly. His eyes were shining with a holy and dazzling blue light. Terrifying blue energy was escaping from the surface of his body. Even his hair was sizzling and turning blue. His body seemed to have broken through the barrier of space. That was the supreme power of the dimensional stone. It allowed him to move freely within the earth as he wished. Coupled with the extreme speed of the dual star form, he was as fast as the Marvel Universe. How did you do it? You don't have the tools to control the dimensional stone. Thanos looked at Kale solemnly and blankly. He had studied for more than 10 years before he found the way to control the power of the infinite stone through the Infinity Glove. I ate the dimensional stone. Kale replied calmly. He continued to throw another punch. The fist crossed the distance and landed on Thanos's chest with extreme speed, sending him to the street below. Bang! His body created a deep pit on the ground. Thanos climbed out of the pit and looked at Kale, who was floating in the air, as if he were looking at a monster. You're crazy. Your body won't be able to take it. Since the beginning of time, overlords who had tried to use their bodies to withstand the power of a single-dimensional stone would be annihilated by the stone in the end. There were no exceptions. After all, it was the infinite stone, the most powerful item in the universe. It wasn't something that could be controlled by living beings. Even if Thanos could control a large amount of power through the Infinity Glove, his body would still suffer irreversible damage at the moment. Not to mention that he had swallowed the infinite stone directly. Let's see if my body can't take it anymore, or if you'll be killed by me first. Using the power of the dimensional stone, Kale flashed close to Thanos again and sent him flying again, crashing through a 5-star hotel building. The fact that he dared to swallow the origin stone of space was not something he did casually, but something he had done after careful consideration. In Kale's view, if he didn't use the power of the stone, it would be impossible to defeat Thanos, who had the Infinity Glove and 3-dimensional stones. And his Superman avatar, Caesar, had once swallowed the dimensional stone. Now his body was as strong as Superman's avatar. Coupled with the twin stars derived from the dimensional stone, he had the amazing idea of using his body as the carrier of the Rubik's Cube to control the dimensional stone. It was just an idea, but when he swallowed the dimensional stone, Kale still felt like his stomach was about to explode. The powerful space energy overflowed from his body and the twin stars burning on his body turned into the dark blue space attribute. Although it was too risky, his body withstood it. Kale flashed close to Thanos and swung his fist. But this time, Thanos had expected it. His left hand, wearing the Infinity Glove, caught the powerful fist. Got you. Thanos held Kale's fist tightly and used the power of the 3-dimensional stones to suppress Kale, making him unable to flash away for a while. As the 3 Infinity Stones, reality, mind, and soul, glowed brightly on the Infinity Glove, Kale suddenly had an extremely ominous premonition. You can only extract the power of 1-dimensional stone after all. I have 3-dimensional stones in my hands. Now I'll let you see the true power of these 3-dimensional stones stacked together. Thanos's face was solemn and indifferent. As the energy backfired on his body, dozens of shackles emerged from the void and firmly locked every inch of Kale's body. He couldn't flash away. Kale's face changed. Then, the thunder that fell from the sky, the lava that spewed from the ground, the storm that tore everything, the big explosion of a supernova, all the power that the universe could produce naturally welcomed a small-scale explosion near him. The combination of the 3-dimensional stones, reality, mind, and soul, allowed Thanos to create things out of thin air and even modify reality. Chapter 680. Rumble. Thunder, lava, storms, meteors, landslides, cracks in the ground, only nature could produce such a powerful force, bombarding Kale. After all the energy gathered at one point and exploded, even the light in the sky disappeared. A black hole appeared in the middle of New York. Even with the Infinity Glove as a transition and suppression, Thanos, who used the power of the 3 primordial stones at the same time, still groaned in pain. A stream of fresh blood flowed down from the corner of his mouth. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth with his right hand and looked forward. The streets and roads of New York in front of him had all been destroyed. Above the empty hole with a radius of 100 meters, dozens of iron chains that locked the surrounding skyscrapers were still tightly wrapped around Kale's body. After a round of attacks with part of the power of the 3 Infinity Stones, the blue flames on Kale's body flickered like a candle flame, in danger of being extinguished at any time. No matter how hard Kale struggled, he couldn't break free from the chains on his body. Instead, the more he struggled, the tighter the chains contracted. The energy of the primordial stone that was bursting in his body also showed signs of being suppressed. He couldn't use instant flash to escape. It's useless. That chain is the chain of eternity, a divine weapon of the same quality as the Infinity Glove. I made it especially for you. Even I can't break it. It can also suppress the divine energy in the body of living beings. Thanos said coldly. His left hand clenched the Infinity Glove, and the condensed thunder, flame, frost, and earth thorns continued to appear on the top of the glove. They continued to fly toward Kyle and landed on his chained body, producing powerful explosive waves of different attributes. The weakened flames on Kyle's body only managed to block a little. Those astonishing supernatural attacks landed squarely on Kyle's body, causing the venom in his body to let out a sharp cry. Because these attacks were mixed with flames and ultrasonic waves. Boss! Yutong, who was lodging in Kale's body, exclaimed uneasily. Don't worry, I'm fine. Kale gritted his teeth and responded with difficulty. He was relying on his superhuman body to withstand the attacks. If it wasn't for his body's strong endurance, his body would have been completely turned into ashes in the first round of small-scale star explosions. However, this wasn't the way to go. Kale was very clear about this point. These iron chains wrapped around his body were restricting and wearing down the divinity and energy in his body. As for Thanos's near-infinite supernatural baptism through the Infinity Glove, even a planet would be destroyed. The divine body was indeed powerful, but it wasn't invincible. As long as it was within the range of a living being's domain, there was a limit to how much the body could withstand. If this continued, he would die. Kale understood this very well, and it was precisely because of this that a resolute look appeared in his eyes, and he finally made a decision in his heart. After being bombarded by another high-temperature fireball, Venom left its symbiotic form. Kale turned Venom back into a creature card and kept it in the card space. At the same time, he summoned the highest card from the card space. The item card appeared on top of Kale's head. After it returned to its physical form, it was clearly a shining purple gem. Raw Stone of Strength? Thanos opened his eyes wide in surprise, and the Infinity Glove's attack was a beat slower. Then, he saw the raw Stone of Strength falling down, and Kale, who happened to be entangled by the iron chain, bit it. His heartbeat stopped at this moment. Rolling his eyes, Kale almost choked on the raw Stone of Strength. His dry mouth chose to hold his breath, and with a gulp, he swallowed the gem in his mouth. Looking at this shocking scene, Thanos blurted out in surprise, "Are you crazy?" He was really crazy. Since the Big Bang, no living being dared to use their body to forcibly bear 2 Infinity Stones at the same time. Not to mention eating it. Madman, this was a real madman. Before Thanos had time to think, Kale, who was imprisoned by the chain of eternity, suddenly growled. His originally blue eyes flashed with a devilish purple color. His body expanded like a balloon, and the surface of his body was in a state of cracking. Powerful and violent purple energy gushed out from it. Clang! With several crisp sounds, the chain of eternity was forcibly broken. Then, it was disintegrated into nothingness by the overflowing purple energy. Ah! Kale, who was freed from the iron chain, floated above the hole, holding his stomach with both hands as he roared and rolled on the ground. The blue and purple energies of the two powerful gems overflowed from the surface of his cracked skin. Like a raging flame, they enveloped Kale's body and tore his enlarged body into pieces inch by inch. Yutong's soul rushed out of Kale's body and anxiously shouted to Kale next to her, "Pull yourself together, boss. It's useless, it's already over." Thanos shook his head slightly and coldly looked at Kale, who was rolling in the air. The raw stone of strength is the strongest to increase a living being's physique, but also the most serious burden on the human body. After swallowing the space raw stone, his body has reached its limit. Now, the raw stone of strength will completely annihilate him into ashes. How could it be? Yutong's soul stared blankly at Kale, who was rolling on the ground in pain. As the energies of the raw stone of space and the raw stone of strength wreaked havoc, Kale's body began to collapse inside and outside at the same time. In the next moment, when he was about to completely turn into ashes, Kale suddenly opened his blue and purple eyes. His collapsed body began to heal at an extremely fast speed. His body's superfast self-healing speed reached a temporary balance with the two energies that were destroying his body. It allowed Kale to take back control of his body for a moment. In just a split second, Kale ignored the distance between them and flashed in front of Thanos. He punched out with the power of the raw stone of strength and the space raw stone of strength, directly punching a bloody hole in Thanos's chest. The fist penetrated his tall and sturdy body and came out from his back. Thanos didn't react at all. He looked at Kale in front of him in astonishment and lowered his head to look at his completely penetrated chest. "How is this possible? I'm sorry. Thanos, I'm going to take you with me." Kale smiled at him. It was the death recombination that he had obtained from the Sokka star supremacy. At the moment of death, the body would be regenerated by the super-strong golden card ability. It allowed Kale to control the power of the two raw stones at this moment. However, that was all. No matter how strong the talent ability was, its priority couldn't be higher than the unlimited raw stone. Kale's left hand that penetrated Thanos's chest was the first to collapse and be annihilated. The super-strong self-healing couldn't keep up with the speed of annihilation. His body began to become transparent. Every blood vessel flowed with blue-purple energy, and then it began to shatter and be annihilated inch by inch. After fighting in the universe for so long, I've never seen someone as ruthless as you. Thanos smiled bitterly. The life in his body was also rapidly fading away. With the hole in his chest as the center, the energy of the raw stone was also annihilating his body. He covered the hole in his chest and said with difficulty, "I will die later than you. After you die, I will take all the raw stones on you and make that snap before I die. You won't have the chance." Kale smiled inexplicably. His body was about to shatter and be annihilated. Finally, he raised his left hand and threw the third raw stone of time into his mouth like a peanut. Thanos widened his eyes in despair. "No!" Yutong's soul wailed and rushed toward Kale's half-transparent body. "It's a pity that I won't be able to see you again." Kale muttered to himself. A merry-go-round flashed through his mind. At this moment, he thought of Howard, Steve, Lucy, Logan, Tawny, Paige, many, many faces. Then, boom! A destructive energy explosion erupted from the center of New York City in the mirror dimension with Kale's body as the center. The entire mirror dimension, including New York City, was shattered inch by inch. Chapter 681. Am I dead? Where am I? His consciousness seemed to have sunk below the surface of the water. He didn't know if only his body was left or if only his soul was left. Kale was in darkness. Rather than darkness, it would be better to call it an unknown mysterious area. In this dark area, there was no light, not even the concept of time and space. He was the only existence here. He was constantly wandering around, trying to find a person, an item, or the boundary of this area. But there was none of this. He didn't know how long he had been wandering. It might have been a minute, a month, a year, or 10 years. Kale was completely lost here. Just like when his doppelganger Caesar was lost in the quantum field, he couldn't find the way back to his original world. Just when Kale was about to give up, he suddenly saw 3 gemstones, shining with dazzling light, hanging high in the corner of this unknown area. They were the space, time, and strength stones. Why are the ores here? Kyle was stunned for a moment. Then, the 3 ores buzzed and flew toward him like shooting stars. Before he could even dodge, it was shot into his body like a bullet. At this moment, he understood everything. This unknown mysterious area was not there, but a world that belonged to him. After eating the 3 infinite stones, he didn't die. Instead, he broke the original shackles of the world and jumped out of the local dimension. He even jumped out of all the parallel universes and became the only existence. Even if there were other Marvel parallel universes, that Kale would have died together with Thanos and not be in his current situation. Using God to describe the current Kale was a bit pale and powerless. He no longer belonged to the category of living creatures. He was more like an existence that transcended the concept of the world and time. The price for this was that no universe could accommodate his real body. So he came to a world that belonged to him. A primitive and chaotic world. So it's like this. Kale showed a bitter smile. He really didn't expect that the soul, mind, and reality stones, if used to the extreme, could forcefully change reality. As for the other space, time, and raw stones of strength, after all of their powers were released in his stomach, it allowed him to accidentally jump out of the dimension of Marvel's world and become the only him. Yutong, is Venom still here? Kale could sense that Yutong's soul was still dormant in his body. Venom was still in his body as a card. However, they could not appear in this world in any form, because this was a world that belonged to him, and only he could come here. I can't go back anymore. Kale looked at the boundless darkness around him and fell into silence. He was fully aware that he had left all dimensions. In other words, his own existence appeared before all other dimensions. This was the price and curse of transcending time and space. He didn't know how long he had been here. This was because this was his own world. As long as Kale willed it, he could create anything here except for living creatures. Sea, land, castle, bed, food. Although Kale didn't need to eat food now and would exist forever, he still wanted to taste the taste of food. He also set the flow of time here and deliberately set up a space boundary wall to make this place look more like a place where people lived. Just like that, he lived here alone for 1,000 years. His memories of the past gradually became blurred. Kale was tired, and he even wanted to die. But now, even if he committed suicide, he would be resurrected immediately. Even if this exclusive world was destroyed, he would continue to live in the cracks of destruction. In the exclusive world. Kale was lying on the beach chair he created, looking at the sea, the sun, and the blue sky he created, drinking the wine he created, and staring blankly at the sword and torch on the table next to him. The vibrating gold sword that had accompanied him in World War II and the eternal fire that had allowed him to create countless miracles. These 2 things were brought over from the original world and could be regarded as the only 2 real things in this fake world. It's all fake. Kyle chuckled as he took a swig of wine. Then, he suddenly remembered something that he had forgotten for a long time. This world is fake. During the superpower competition, he saw this sentence in Odin's treasure vault. At that time, Kale was completely confused, but now, everything seemed to be connected. If I say, the Marvel world I used to be in was fake, then who created it? Kale muttered to himself. He thought of a possibility, the only possibility, which made him tremble with excitement. Suddenly getting up from the sofa, Kale immediately flew off the ground. As the sea and the sun continued to move away, he came to another corner of the dark area. "Come on, let's try it." Kale's eyes regained his fighting spirit. He stretched out his hands, and his 10 fingers curled into a circle. A little light appeared in the middle. In theory, he could create anything here. Then, how about creating a single universe with independent spacetime and laws? First, a little starlight appeared in the darkness. Kale's left finger gently poked, and the starlight immediately exploded, turning into a small cloud of mist that existed in an exclusive space but was completely isolated from this place. The universe exploded. Under the control of Kale's hands and mind, a universe gradually took shape. It was like a translucent football in his hands, glowing with circles of light. The prototype of the universe is here. First, adjust the acceleration and let it self-perfect in the laws. Looking at the prototype of the Marvel Universe floating in front of him, Kale suddenly remembered the 2 spacetime coordinates he obtained from the original Mind Stone of Illusion, so that's how it is. Kale's eyes shone. He continuously accelerated the prototype of the Marvel Universe he created, making it pass hundreds of billions of years in a short time. It self-evolved and perfected until it reached the time indicated by one of the spacetime coordinates. Inside the independent Marvel Universe, Kale suddenly appeared on a snowy mountain. Wearing casual clothes, he stood on the top of the mountain and looked at the vast land below that was similar to the plants on Earth, but not quite the same. A bird similar to the descendant of the pterosaur flew over his head, making a crisp cry. Kale couldn't hide the excitement in his eyes. The Marvel Universe he created was really completed. The inner Earth gave birth to real creatures, living creatures. Yes. Even if this world had been created and was fake, it was still not real. But all the creatures in this world couldn't be created. They were real, and they evolved and reproduced by themselves. The first spacetime coordinate refers to the Marvel Earth I created millions of years ago. Kale saw that under the snowy mountain, there were a few half-ape men with clothes that didn't cover their bodies. They were chasing an ancestor of the mammoth. Kale's body moved, and the wind carried him into the sky, stirring up countless snowflakes, and flew into outer space like a rocket. The mammoth below was so scared that it directly collapsed to the ground. Several half-ape men behind it looked up in horror. They looked at the figure that was flying up and hurriedly knelt down in that direction, making whimpering sounds. Creator. Creator. Chapter 682. What he did represented the law. Kale didn't use any ability and just flew out of the Earth's atmosphere. He came to near space and looked down, quietly looking at the blue Earth where human civilization had not yet officially risen. After looking for a long time, his body flashed and flew toward the end of the infinite universe. With a thought, he crossed tens of millions of light years and even reached the end of a world. The Marvel Universe was divided into 9 realms, 9 different worlds. Kyle had indeed created it this way, creating the foundation of the universe in the form of the world tree. The 9 worlds were Asgard, located at the highest and most central part of the universe, Vanaheim, which could give birth to Vanaheim, the world of dark elves, the world of humans, the world of fire giants, the world of dwarves, the world of the dead, the world of ice and snow, and the world of giants. Why was the universe divided into 9 worlds? Kale didn't understand before, but in the process of creation, he gradually understood that if the universe wasn't divided, then the universe would be ruled by the superior giants. Humans, dwarves, and other weak creatures wouldn't have any chance to develop and even survive. Therefore, the environment of the human world was relatively mild, isolated from the giants and elves and other powerful existences. But in the next few days, Kale traveled all over the 9 worlds and saw a scene of devastation, slaughter and war filled every corner of the universe. The powerful giants and elves broke the weak boundary and wantonly broke into other worlds, killing the local races. The 9 worlds were in a mess, and the human world, which had the mildest environment, became the center of the universe battlefield. Countless stars were directly blown up, and the remains of the fallen stars were scattered all over the universe. The powerful races became the rulers, and the weak races never had a chance to rise again. They hid in the cracks of the planets and struggled to survive. If there is a creator, then the creator must be crazy to create such a hopeless world. Wandering in the chaotic and dark Nine Worlds, Kale heard this resentful complaint the most. In the end, it still failed. Kale floated in the middle of the universe he created and showed a bitter smile. Of course, he could restart the Marvel universe and even kill all the powerful and tyrannical giants in the universe, but it was meaningless. If he did that, would it really be the Marvel world he wanted? Right, Asgard. With a thought, Kale directly teleported to the world at the top of the Marvel universe with his last glimmer of hope. But when he arrived here, he was stunned. Asgard, the Holy Land world that was supposed to give birth to the Protoss, had been destroyed and burned down by the giants who had forced their way in. All that was left was a small piece of wasteland floating in the middle of the destroyed world. Such a wasteland could no longer nurture a powerful god race. Those space-time coordinates allowed me to arrive at the correct place and world. What is the meaning of that? Kale landed on the wasteland. There were no signs of life here. The wasteland was full of scorched marks, and only evil undead creatures were wandering around. Kale sighed. Just as he was about to leave, he suddenly heard the sound of fighting coming from somewhere in the wasteland. Huh! Kale's body flashed and came to the other side of the wasteland. Looking down from above, in the wasteland where there were no signs of life, there was a 10-year-old child who looked like a human. He was holding a sword and fighting with an undead monster that was several times stronger than him. The undead monster was 3 meters tall, like a deformed tiger with sharp fangs and claws. Its body was full of evil and powerful energy. Just a low roar could produce sound waves that shook the air. The child, who was wearing thin clothes and had no armor, only held a broken sword. The energy in his body was so weak that it was negligible. He could be swallowed by the undead monster at any time. But walking on the edge of death, the child's eyes burned with fighting spirit. He became braver and braver as he fought. He fell to the ground many times, but he continued to climb up and fight the undead monster to the end. Kale was moved. The gap in strength was so big that there should be no hope, but in the end, the undead monster's claws tore apart the child's lower abdomen. The child's sword also pierced through the undead monster's head. Both sides fell to the wasteland. A few seconds later, the undead monster with a sword in its head slowly got up again. Its red eyes looked at the child lying in a pool of blood in front of it. Is it really like this? Dad, Mom, the people were right. Hard work can never make up for the shortcomings of a race. The child covered the fatal wound on his lower abdomen and lay on the ground powerlessly. He looked at the undead monster with its bloody mouth open and revealed an expression of relief. It was indeed a mistake for the weak to be born in this world. Or it could be said that the existence of this world was a mistake. Being weak was the original sin. The child closed his eyes. After a few seconds, he was not swallowed by the undead monster. He opened his eyes in surprise and found that the undead monster was long gone. In its place was a silver-haired youth standing in front of him. "Get up," the silver-haired youth said to him. "I'm seriously injured." "How can I get up?" The child was halfway through his words when he suddenly froze. He got up from the ground as if nothing had happened. He nodded and touched his lower abdomen. The fatal wound on his lower abdomen was long gone. Even his clothes were restored. The child looked at him in shock. "Who are you?" "You can call me Lord God." Kale smiled faintly and looked directly at him. He asked, "If you become a top starry sky powerhouse, what will you do?" "Me." The child was about to speak but paused. He suddenly realized that this was the only chance to change his fate. He took a deep breath and clenched his fists. He said in a deep voice, I will return peace to this universe and unify the chaotic 9 worlds. I will let the strong races not bully the weak races. The weak races can defeat the invincible and arrogant giants through development. I will restore peace and hope to this universe that has been ravaged by war and reduced to darkness. Good. Kale smiled. I will give you the strength you need. He waved his left hand and an ability card entered the child's body. It was a divinity ability card. The current him could create it at any time. My body. The child was stunned. He felt his body brimming with power that he had never felt before. And these. Kale waved his left hand. A burning golden plate, the method and materials to forge the eternal series of weapons, and a blue cosmic tesseract with an origin space stone inside. These 3 items silently hovered in front of the child. Lord God. What price do I have to pay? The child looked at the items hovering in front of him and asked Kale with a rare calmness. The price is, don't forget your original intention. Kale turned around and was about to leave when he suddenly remembered something. He stopped and turned his back to the child. What is your name? My name is. Before the child could answer, Kale cut him off. Never mind. From now on, you will be called Odin. He took a step forward and disappeared from the wasteland. The child stared blankly at the direction Kale left, then at the divine items hovering in front of him. He then knelt down and bowed. Odin, farewell, Lord God. End of chapter. Chapter 683. After Kale left Asgard, which was like a wasteland, he did not leave the current Marvel universe. Instead, he went directly to the human world, where the early Milky Way alliance was located. A technological civilization had not yet been born here. In other words, there was no chance for a technological civilization to be born here. The birth of a technological civilization mostly came from the weak who wanted to close the gap with the strong. But now, the giants and elves were too strong. They did not need advanced technology. Just by relying on the genetic advantage of their race, they could easily destroy the budding civilization and occupy the vast and fertile star field. The weak races hid in the cracks of the star bones and struggled to survive. They did not have enough resources, time, and space to peacefully survive the early technological civilization. Such a stalemate needed something to break it. So Kale came to the center of the human world's universe battlefield. In the sky above the star field, he suddenly appeared and floated above the starry sky, looking down at the giants and elves who were killing the weak races. What is that? Soon, a flame giant noticed Kale's existence. Its body was the size of a mountain. Its body was made of molten lava and was burning. It held a fiery red sword that was hundreds of meters long in its hand. Its whole body was exuding a heavy and powerful aura of destruction. A mere insect-like creature dares to fly above my head? The flame giant let out a low roar, and its voice exploded in the sky above the entire star field. Then, its body moved, and with a stomp, the ground turned into a fiery hell. The crimson fire greatsword carried enough power to destroy a planet as it pierced towards Kyle, who was like a tiny black dot in the vast starry sky. Kale did not move. He slowly raised his eyes and looked calmly at the flame giant. It was only for a moment. Starting from the tip of the sword, the fiery red sword shattered inch by inch like a landslide. The flame giant looked at its empty hands blankly at first. Then, it showed an unprecedented look of horror. It suddenly realized what kind of existence Kale was. So, it tried its best to escape. But before it could take a step, the flame giant's body shook. Its mountain-like body turned into a pile of ashes and dissipated with the wind on the star-field battlefield. At this moment, at the center of the 9 realms, in the vast galactic battlefield, which had lasted for hundreds of millions of years, was now so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. From the invincible giant elves to the weak undead insects, hundreds of billions of creatures felt their hearts throbbing as they looked at the figure of the young man floating in the starry sky. In just a blink of an eye, the invincible flame overlord that dominated the 9 worlds was killed. This could not be explained by the common sense of the universe. If one had to explain it, there was only the most impossible answer. The Creator. It could only be the sovereign God of creation. Let me introduce myself. I am a sovereign. Kale smiled faintly. His voice was very soft, but it could be heard by all the creatures on the battlefield. Looking down at the countless trembling creatures, Kale waved his hand and a purple gemstone floated in front of him. This is the origin stone of power. This is the symbol of the power of the universe. No matter who it is, as long as they obtain it, they can become the strongest of the strongest. Whoever touches it will become its master. After leaving this sentence, Kale's body shook and completely disappeared from the sky. Only the origin stone of power that was shining with purple light was left. It lost its ability to float and fell toward the vast battlefield below. A second ago, all the creatures were still under Kale's pressure. A second later, all the creatures went crazy and rushed toward the origin stone of power without fear of death. Get out of my way. That's mine. A frost giant took a step forward and froze the bodies of the creatures. It jumped high and was about to grab the purple gemstone in its hand. In the end, an incomparably huge axe swung down and chopped off its entire head. The powerful frost giant with the huge axe was about to snatch the origin stone of power when it was besieged by several other giants and elves. The masters of the origin stone of power kept changing in a short period of time. This long-lasting battle in the starry sky had completely reached a climax. It became more and more intense and showed no signs of stopping. Kale, who was hiding in the dark and watching all of this. His face was indifferent, but the corner of his mouth quietly rose. This was his goal. Since he couldn't stop the war, he might as well start a large-scale war in the universe. If the previous wars were considered small fights between the giants and elves, the victims were the weak races. But now, with the origin stone of power, the giants and elves would also kill each other. Without their natural enemies, they would be like ants and might die in the next second. This war would sweep across the entire 9 worlds. The scale of the war would be unprecedented. Even the giants and elves would soon become endangered creatures. When all the creatures in the 9 worlds were afraid, when they knew the seriousness and danger of the war, when they felt enough pain, they would truly desire peace. This would be a great purge. Countless creatures would die. But when their corpses piled up like mountains, the hope of the birth of a technological civilization would be born under these corpses. Kale didn't have the slightest pity. For him, the worst-case scenario was to restart the entire universe. He came to the end of the human world. On a planet at the edge, he created the contract altar and the origin stone of soul. He gave the creatures of the 9 worlds a chance to find it. But they could only use their true love to exchange for this origin stone. The origin stone of power was sought after by war maniacs. This origin stone of soul could only be obtained by creatures with persistent beliefs. The former represented the body, and the latter represented the spirit. These 2 origin stones would allow the human world to finally usher in a relatively peaceful balance. After all of this was done, Kale came to the border of the 9 worlds. In the center of a barren star field, he created a planet. This planet was created by him. Naturally, it had an extraordinary ability. It could swallow the remains of other planets at will and act as a planet's garbage cleaner. He built a house on this planet and lived in it for the time being. The revision of the Marvel Universe was a long and meticulous project. It wasn't something that could be revived by throwing a few things and saving a few people. On the same day, Venom got out of his card state. This made Kale feel somewhat gratified. In any case, he could be considered as half an old friend. He could chat with him from time to time. A month later, Yutong's soul woke up from his body. After Kale told her everything, he used the power of the basic law to create the Marvel Universe to reshape her body. One's mind could cover the entire Marvel Universe and manipulate any matter that didn't have a specific form of existence. This ability was called annihilation. In this way, Kyle, Yutong, and Venom, the three of them lived on a planet named Kami at the edge of the Marvel Universe, far away from the disputes. Chapter 684. 10 years passed by. 10 years seemed very long for most of the living races in the Marvel Universe. But for Kale and others who lived on the celestial planet, they had infinite life, and these 10 years were like a snap of the fingers. But the biggest problem was loneliness. It was too boring. When one's life and body are eternal, and there is no goal or ideal to pursue in life, this would instead form a huge void and powerlessness. This kind of loneliness and boredom was unbearable for Venom. After saying goodbye to Kale, it decided to go out alone and explore the 9 realms of Marvel. In the first half of its life, it could only survive by attaching itself to Kale's body. But now, after attaching itself to Kale's body for 10 years, after its genes went through super divinization, it had transcended the racial boundary. Not only did it evolve to not be afraid of flames and ultrasound, but it could also act alone, and its devouring ability was strong enough to swallow stars. Unknowingly, it was invincible, and it was a veritable, lying down, victory. Not long after Venom left the celestial planet, it gained the invincible title of Planet Devourer in the Marvel Universe. No one knew that its predecessor was just a group of liquid symbiotes attached to a suckling creature. Kale and Yutong continued to live a leisurely life in the celestial planet, in the Lord God's mansion created by the celestial planet. Of course. During this period, Kale had asked Yutong to pay attention to the situation of the 9 realms of Marvel and report to him regularly. In these 10 years, because of the power gem, the universe war became more and more exaggerated and out of control. The central battlefield of the human world completely fell and collapsed, and countless stars around it perished. The corpses of the once invincible giants and elves were floating in outer space. Because their bodies were too strong to rot, they became resources for some races to collect. Every day, hundreds of millions of lives died. In the end, no one knew whose hands the power gem fell into. There were rumors that it was taken away by a giant and became an overlord. There were also rumors that the weak creatures secretly hid it, waiting for the future to rise. But in any case, this super large-scale universe war that had been turbulent for 10 years, after the number of powerful giants and elves was sharply reduced from tens of thousands to tens of thousands, the war finally ended without warning one morning when the power gem disappeared. That's right. This cosmic war that started at an unknown time and covered the 9 worlds of Marvel and lasted for hundreds of billions of years finally came to an end in the 11th year after the appearance of the power gem. It was very nonsensical, but it was also reasonable. After all, if they continued to fight, the entire universe would be destroyed. At the dawn of this day, the weak races that had been hiding in darkness, barrenness, and the corners beneath were delighted to find that the giants and elves that roamed the stars were gone. There were no creatures as powerful as gods flying in the sky. It was so clear that one could see the starry sky filled with stars. There were no powerful monsters wreaking havoc on the ground. One could see the vast blue ocean. The Marvel Universe, after a long time, for the first time, welcomed true peace. It was also on this day that the weak race that yearned for peace officially rose to power. Meanwhile, there was a golden-haired youth riding an 8-winged Pegasus with a long spear in his hand. He created a rainbow bridge that crossed the 9 realms. He issued an endless challenge to the other giants and elves who had survived. His name is Odin. The 9 worlds were in an uproar. No one dared to follow him. He alone challenged the remaining giants and elves of Marvel alone. At first, the giants and elves didn't pay attention to him and treated him as a fly. But after a long time, Odin crossed the rainbow bridge every day and came to their world to challenge them. Who would be able to endure it after such a long time? In the world of fire, the new flame overlord took the lead to fight Odin. Almost all creatures thought that Odin would lose. After all, no creature's genes were stronger than the giants. After all, the giants were the first powerful ancient race to appear after the birth of the universe. But this battle, which was not optimistic, lasted for 3 days and 3 nights. 3 days later, Odin rode the 8-winged Pegasus and returned to Asgard weakly but energetically under the summoning of the Bifrost. On the other side, the new flame overlord made an oath and curse to destroy Odin's home with the twilight of the gods in the future. As for the battle between them, no one knew who won or lost, but this was still Odin's battle to become a god. Since the birth of Marvel's 9 worlds, this was the first time that other creatures had successfully challenged the giants and elves without losing. This broke the genetic curse that prevented the weak races from rising and turning over. At this time, Odin called on the creatures of the 9 worlds to quell the war turmoil at the edge of the 9 worlds, resist the hegemonic rule of the giants and elves, and drive them back to their original world. For a time, countless creatures threw themselves under his arm. This was an uprising that swept across the starry sky. Odin and Asgard's forces rose at a rocket speed in one fell swoop. They preached to stop war with war, to limit the scope of the giants' and elves' activities, and to unify the chaotic 9 worlds. Celestial planet, Lord God's mansion. The universe's disputes couldn't reach here. It was very quiet and peaceful here. In the courtyard full of flowers, the sculpture fountain in the center was sprinkling water. Kale was lying on a sun chair, bathing in the bright sunshine. Boss. Yutong was wearing a black dress. She elegantly walked out of the mansion with a cup of hot coffee. She gently sat on the corner of his chair and put the coffee on the table next to him. She softly said, "You succeeded." "Yes, I failed long ago. Now I'm just making up for it and correcting it in time." Kale smiled faintly. He hugged her delicate body and took a sip of the hot coffee. "So now, is the correction complete?" Yutong blinked her beautiful eyes. "The whole test paper was wrong. Now, only one mistake has been corrected. How can it be so easy to get 100 points?" Kale shook his head. He put down the cup and whispered to Yutong, "It must be boring to have you accompany me here." "How could it be?" Yutong's delicate face smiled. She laid down on his chest, "Like this, I can't be happier to have you all to myself. You're not bored, but I think it's a bit boring. We should find some fun to play." Kale hugged her body. He thought for a while and said, "The year after next, let's go out and walk around the 9 realms." "Okay." Yutong agreed. Now, they didn't use days to calculate time. Instead, they used years as a unit. The year after next. Kale and Yutong left Celestial Planet. It wasn't as obvious as the Rainbow Bridge, but it was like a passage. Even stars and black holes had to give way. They couldn't block in front of them. The first station. Kale chose Asgard. He brought Yutong directly to the highest level of the Marvel Universe. Asgard had changed a lot compared to over a decade ago. A prototype of a golden immortal palace occupied the original wasteland. Chapter 685. The space was turbulent like waves, and all the defenses of the divine realm were in vain. In this way, Kale and Yutong gently entered the divine realm and descended on the physical Bifrost. "Who are you?" The first gatekeeper, who was wearing armor and holding a holy sword, looked at the 2 people in front of him in disbelief. They didn't pass through the Bifrost, but directly entered the divine realm from outer space with their own bodies. This was simply unbelievable. Moreover, he, who had the racial talent of clairvoyance, couldn't see a trace of energy from Kale and Yutong. It must be known that even the weakest biological race, the bodies of dead creatures, still had a weak energy that could be seen clearly. Unless it was an existence like the giants. The gatekeeper's forehead was dripping with cold sweat, and he didn't dare to continue thinking. This was not something he could detect with his strength. Kale looked at the gatekeeper and narrowed his eyes, as if he had seen through everything. The gatekeeper's face was pale, but he still maintained a defensive posture. Then he heard Kale casually say, "Don't worry, I have no hostility. Where is Odin? I want to see him." "His Majesty Odin, he is in the immortal palace." Hearing Kale call Odin by his name, the gatekeeper wiped the sweat from his forehead and forced himself to remain calm. He pressed the holy sword against the ground and said with difficulty, "I will inform His Majesty Odin." "Okay." Kale and Yutong stood in place, not in a hurry, and looked at the scenery around the bifrost. Sure enough. Although the divine realm was rebuilt, under the bifrost, there was still a dry and cracked riverbed. There were no green plants that represented life, and black smoke still covered most of the starry sky. The scars left by the war were not so easy to fade away, and it would take a very long time to repair. In less than 10 seconds, Odin appeared on his 6-winged Pegasus, clad in silver armor. However, before he could reach Kale, he had the Pegasus land on the Rainbow Bridge. He dismounted and rushed to Kale, kneeling on one knee. "Greetings, Lord Overlord." The gatekeeper was shocked speechless. The invincible master of the realm of the gods, Odin, had actually knelt down and saluted a youth who was younger than him. If the creatures of the 9 realms saw this, it would cause a huge uproar. "Get up. In the future, you will represent the supreme authority of the 9 worlds of the universe. There's no need to kneel to anyone." Kale looked calmly at Odin in front of him. After more than 10 years, the unyielding child who had fought the undead creatures to the end had grown to a height of nearly 1.9 meters. There was even a mature beard on his mighty and resolute face. "This kneel is to repay you for recognizing my worth," Odin said solemnly. In the end, he still formally saluted Kale before standing up on the Rainbow Bridge. He gestured to the golden palace behind him. "Lord Overlord, please come in." Kale nodded. He suddenly glanced at the gatekeeper next to him. "The gatekeeper of the realm of the gods you chose has a good temperament and will. It's just that he's a little weak." Odin said helplessly, "Lord Overlord. He's already the strongest existence in the universe that's most suitable to be a gatekeeper. Come here." Kale thought for a moment and said to the gatekeeper, "Yes." The gatekeeper respectfully came before Kale. Kale directly stretched out 2 fingers and tapped the gatekeeper's forehead. Then, the gatekeeper let out a scream and covered his eyes in extreme pain. "Lord Overlord, this..." Odin looked at him in bewilderment. "Just watch." Kale quietly looked at the gatekeeper who was wailing in pain. Beside him, Yutong revealed a thoughtful smile. After a while, the gatekeeper suddenly raised his head. When he opened his eyes again, they emitted a light that was as bright as day. His gaze seemed to see through the 9 realms of the universe. He looked around in a daze and then saluted Kale with incomparable excitement. "Lord Overlord, thank you very much. That's the Heimdallai that can perceive all things. With it, you're worthy to be the gatekeeper of the Rainbow Bridge built by the Rubik's Cube." Kale said this and then led Yutong to the newly built Golden Palace on the wasteland under Odin's lead. Realm of the Gods' Immortal Palace. Under Odin's lead, no soldiers or guards dared to stop them. They all looked at Kale and Yutong in surprise as he personally received them. Odin said to Kale emotionally, "Right now, there are more and more races that yearn for peace. The unification of the 9 realms is becoming smoother and smoother." The unification mentioned here didn't mean that the divine realm had taken in all living beings of the 9 realms. Instead, it meant that the divine realm was acting as a cleaner, drawing a clear line between the 9 realms and wiping out the flames of war that hadn't yet been ignited. Living beings of a certain realm were only allowed to move within that realm. They weren't allowed to cross that realm. That was the only unification. Of course. During this process, Odin's fame and reputation became greater and greater. He would definitely be recorded in the annals of the universe in the future. Odin brought Kale and Yutong to the reception hall and sat down. The young and dignified Divine Realm Queen also seemed to know the nobility of the two guests. She personally served them drinks and fruits before leaving the reception hall. Lord Overlord. Odin pondered for a bit, then looked at Kale and said, "The Tesseract and Eternal Fire you gave me before, I borrowed them to create the Rainbow Bridge and the Eternal Weapon. I also enchanted the Uru metal. Now, I can return these two things to you." "No need." Kale shook his head and said, "The Tesseract. You can find a chance to put it on Earth in the future." Earth? Odin was stunned. Even though he had traversed the 9 realms and been to many places, he still didn't know where Earth was. Yutong smiled and explained, "It's a blue planet in the Milky Way in the universe of the human world. Soon, the human race and related civilizations will be born." "I see." Although Odin said that, he was even more confused. He didn't know why such an existence would mention such an insignificant planet. She even asked him to leave the Tesseract there in the future. But it didn't matter if he didn't know. Now that the Lord Overlord mentioned it, Earth would definitely become the center of the human world in the future. As for the Eternal Fire, you can keep it for now. In the future, you will know its true use. Kale smiled faintly. "Yes, Lord Overlord." Odin quickly responded. He was about to say something when a small figure suddenly barged in at the entrance of the hall. It was a little girl who was just over 3 years old. She was very cute, barefooted, and the bells on her hands jingled. She ran toward Odin and called out in a childish voice, "Father. Why are you here?" Looking at the little girl, Odin smiled bitterly and introduced her to Kale, who was sitting next to him. "This is my daughter, Hela." Kale looked at the 3-year-old Hela and couldn't associate her with the domineering Queen of Death. Chapter 686. Divine Realms Palace of Immortals, inside the reception hall. Hela. Facing his daughter who had interrupted the meeting, Odin put on a serious face and raised his right hand toward Kale and Yutong. "This is the Lord God and his servant, Lady Yutong. Hurry up and pay your respects to the two lords." "Lord God. Lord God." Hela's eyes widened in curiosity. After looking at Kale and Yutong for a few seconds, she suddenly ran toward Kale and hugged his leg with her white and tender hands. "Hela, don't be rude." Odin was shocked. He was afraid that his daughter's offense would anger the Lord God. Although he was the master of Divine Realm and could fight the flame giant to a draw, he knew better than anyone that this was a gift from the Lord God. And a mere giant, in front of this person, was simply an ant-like existence. "It's okay." Kyle waved his hand. He lowered his head and looked at little Hela. She was wearing a girl's dress, and her black hair was tied into 2 short ponytails. She had a delicate face, and she was as cute as a doll. Especially when Hela hugged his leg, she looked so cute that even Yutong could not help but laugh. She treated Kale's tall and straight body as a mountain. Under Odin's frightened gaze, little Hela climbed up Kale's left leg to the seat and finally sat in his arms. She let out an innocent laughter that sounded like silver bells. Kale did not have any objections and allowed her to play around. "Lord God, I've made a fool of myself. It's my fault for not teaching her well." Odin's forehead was covered in cold sweat as he said helplessly, "This daughter of mine has been extremely naughty since she was young and has been spoiled by her mother. She will definitely think of a way to get whatever she wants." "You mean, she likes me?" Kale teased. "I wouldn't dare." Odin's face was slightly pale. The sweat that had stopped suddenly burst out. Children need to be taught well. One look at you and I can tell that you haven't taught her much. Kale smiled and stretched out a finger, lightly poking little Gila's white and tender face. This caused little Gila to smile and reach out, her palm holding his finger. Odin lowered his head. After a moment of silence, he sighed, I'm ashamed to say this. I've been busy with the affairs of the divine region and the war in the 9 worlds. I've only just become the master of the divine region, so I haven't had much time to discipline her. Kale said softly, a child will grow up quickly if you're not careful. When they have matured and independent thoughts, you won't be able to control them even if you want to. If one looked at the future results, perhaps Odin was a good king of gods, but he was not a good father. The 3 children that he raised were all wastrels, and he was a professional in the divine territory. However, he didn't seem to have the right to lecture Odin. After all, he didn't have any children. The wine was finished, and so was the chat. Kale and Yutong didn't plan to stay in the divine territory for long. Odin sent them all the way to the celestial palace. However, little Gila still clung to Kale and didn't want to leave his arms. Odin finally carried her back. Little Gila opened her cute eyes and looked at Kale. She was still reluctant to part with him. Lord God. I'll come to see you next time, little Gila. Just stay here and wait for me. As Kyle spoke, he suddenly thought of something. He reached into the void with his left hand and took out a ruby out of thin air. He handed the ruby to little Gila who was in Odin's arms. I didn't bring any gifts, so I'll give this to you as a toy. Lord God, this is. Odin's eyes widened in surprise. He sensed a powerful energy from the ruby that was almost the same as the tesseract. In fact, the energy contained in the ruby was even more violent. Odin didn't know what to say. This was an item that existed on the same level as the origin stone of strength and universal magic. It was the strongest strategic resource in the universe, and he was treating it as a toy? A small gift? This was too shocking. Little Gila did not think too much about it. Her black eyes lit up as she reached out and grabbed the ruby, hugging it lovingly. Thank you, Lord God. That's the origin stone of reality. It can change reality and create things out of thin air. I've temporarily sealed most of its power. Use it to restore your homeland. Kale's last words were obviously for Odin. Then, he and Yutong disappeared from the celestial palace. Farewell, Lord God. Looking at the empty space where the 2 disappeared, Odin said sincerely, his face full of gratitude. Little Gila, who was in his arms, didn't even care about the ruby in her hand. Lord God. She looked around blankly, trying to find Kale's figure. However, in the grand celestial palace, not a single person could be seen. However, Kale's unintentional words of, stay here obediently and wait for him, were deeply imprinted in Gila's young heart. In the future, even if millions of years passed, she wouldn't be able to forget it. If I stayed obediently in the divine realm, would you really come back to see me? Even if she didn't have a family by her side, sitting alone on the throne, and the world was silent, she would still have such thoughts. After Kale and Yutong left the divine realm, they didn't return to the celestial planet. Instead, they wandered around the 9 worlds. The universe war that had lasted for many years had ended, and the 9 worlds had mostly returned to peace. Boss, what's that? Yutong saw a circular mineral that was as large as a planet floating in outer space. The alien Zergs, who could survive in space for a short period of time, were moving back and forth to excavate the mineral inside. It's the head of a giant. Kale smiled faintly. Even the giant in front of him probably didn't expect this. The weak race that he had viewed as an ant when he was alive was now using the tissue and brain of the giant's head as nutrients, as a new energy source to irrigate the seeds of civilization. After wandering around the 9 worlds for half a round, Kale and Yutong finally came to a relatively barren planet in the human world. Earth. The main reason why this place wasn't affected by the previous universe war was that it was too remote. There were no resources or high-level life forms, and there were no signs of civilization being born. Kale floated in outer space near Earth and transmitted his voice to Yutong beside him. "It's too slow. Let's intervene a little." "Okay." Yutong understood what he meant and closed her eyes. After a while, a huge force enveloped the entire Earth. The Earth's interior trembled non-stop. The glaciers on the surface melted on a large scale, and the connected continental plates started to split into countless plates. Kale raised his left hand and casually threw a dark green gem toward the Earth's plate. That was the origin stone of time. Kale treated it as a seed of civilization and placed it on Earth millions of years ago. Only primitive humans could obtain it. That person would become the earliest sorcerer, leading his people to rise and building the human civilization. In the end, the person who obtained it would become the guardian of Earth. All of this was predestined. Chapter 687. After leaving Earth, Kale and Yutong did not return to the celestial planet, but had been wandering in the 9 realms of Marvel. On a planet that had given birth to a budding technological civilization. Kale and Yutong landed in the city of the planet and looked at the 3 to 4 meters tall native race walking by. They were tall and strong, and there were signs of technological civilization here. They would probably become a top civilization at the overlord level of the stars in the future. It was just that the 2 of them came here and stood in the center of the bustling street, but they did not attract the attention of the locals and technological instruments. It was as if nothing could detect their existence. Kale's existence was the law. In this self-created Marvel universe, he did not need the infinite origin stone at all, and he could even create one at will. This should be the Titan star, where the civilization of Thanos was born in the future. Yutong's face was a little cold, and asked, "Do you want to destroy this planet?" For them now, destroying a planet was just a matter of saying a word. "No need." Kale shook his head and looked at the passing Titan child. "This is just a cycle of reincarnation. After going around in a circle, we have returned to the starting point. Existence is reasonable." Kale raised his left hand and created a brand new origin stone. Its appearance was a gem that glowed with yellow light. Mind Origin Stone. Yutong stared at the origin stone in Kale's hand. She had worn this infinite origin stone for a long time, so she was very familiar with it. "I have been wondering before. Why would the Mind Origin Stone have 2 coordinates inside and something that temporarily interferes with the illusion? Now, I understand." As Kale spoke, he stared at the origin stone in his hand. Under his gaze, 2 coordinates had been imprinted inside the origin stone, as well as a small remnant of his will as the creator. This Mind Origin Stone was an indispensable part of a world's revolution. Kale casually threw the origin stone in his hand onto the ground of the Titan star. No matter who would become its master in the future, the Mind Origin Stone would lead the Titans here to the end of being conceited, stubborn, and self-destructive. This was a curse on the exterminating tyrants. After finishing all this coldly, Kale whispered helplessly, "This Marvel world is really fake." These were the seeds that he had planted, the rules that he had set, and the results that he had reaped. He circled once and returned to the starting point. "Boss, I'm real. I can't be any more real." Yutong reached out her hands and held his hands. "That's true." Kale smiled, but he had other doubts in his heart. "If you say." This Marvel world was created by himself, and he didn't exist in other Marvel worlds. It was as if he had always been living in his own special world. It was just that he appeared at different times. Then what about Carter's child? What about Superman's clone? What about the members of the Avengers from the parallel universe? They must not be in the current Marvel universe. Because this Marvel universe, due to Kale's restrictions, has the same unique characteristic as him. From this, it can be inferred that in addition to the Marvel world he created, there are countless other Marvel worlds and different worlds, worlds that are not created by him, or perhaps they are real worlds. Superman's clone and the others inadvertently jumped out of the endless loop of this world. Knowing is one thing, but it's difficult to break it. Kale sighed. He thought he had found the final answer, but after crossing the mountain, he saw a bigger secret hidden behind. He was now like a person who was dreaming. He knew that he was dreaming, but he couldn't wake up. He could only continue to immerse himself in the dream he created. To break this dream, he needed a person in reality to wake him up. Let's go and see other places. Kale took Yutong and left Titan Star and continued to wander in other stars. Time, September 13, 1999. Location, X-Men Universe. It has been more than 10 years since the Battle of Apocalypse. Superman, Caesar and Apocalypse have completely disappeared from the world since 12 years ago. No one knows where they went. Even Caesar's old friend, Professor X, doesn't know. According to the intelligence investigation of various countries around the world, 116 bar and nightclub owners recall that since the Battle of Apocalypse that subverted the world, they have never seen the blonde boy who dominated the bushes. After the Battle of Apocalypse, the world was turned upside down. At least now, mutants have been legally recognized by various countries. Mutants can walk freely under the sun. Although the old concept of human beings cannot be completely eliminated in more than 10 years, more and more people have begun to recognize mutants. This is the result of Superman Caesar's deterrence and behavior, which pushed governments to act. Superman Caesar is also known as the God of Mutants by the vast majority of mutants. Although the God of Mutants is more appropriate to call him Apocalypse, after all, Apocalypse was the first mutant, and Caesar was not a human from birth. New York, Academy for Gifted Teenagers. Since the existence of mutants was legal, this has become the world's most authoritative and largest mutant academy. At this time, on the gravel path in the garden, a tall and beautiful blonde girl, holding a book in her hand, walked through the campus path, attracting the attention of many new mutant freshmen. Senior Phoenix. Not only is her appearance one of the best in the academy, but her mutant ability and knowledge are also top-notch. At a young age, she already has a doctorate in 7 majors. Over the years, not only the students in the academy, but also many aristocrats and rich people outside the academy have been chasing her like butterflies and bees. If they really lined up, they could line up from the school gate to downtown New York. Unfortunately, Phoenix still has that cold and arrogant attitude, and no man is favored by her. Jean. A tall young man wearing strange sunglasses chased after her. Scott. Jean turned around and after seeing the young man, her cold face showed a touch of warmth. But, that was all. I want to talk to you, is it convenient? Scott mustered up the courage to ask. Jean nodded slightly and stood on the wooden bridge next to the lake. Scott looked at her and said excitedly, I passed the interview today, Professor X has allowed me to be an intern teacher in advance. Congratulations. Jean smiled. Scott smiled and said, Jean, with your ability, you should have been a teacher a long time ago, right? I'm not suitable. Jean's beautiful eyes kept looking at the lake, no one knew what she was thinking. Recently, another student with a very exaggerated ability came. Next. Scott kept looking for topics to talk about, but Jean was always like that, unperturbed, and nothing could attract her attention. Looking at Jean in front of him, Scott gradually became discouraged. Their bodies were so close, but their hearts were so far apart. Scott suddenly said, are you still thinking about him? Jean was in a daze and looked at him in surprise. Caesar. As soon as Scott said this name, there was a buzz, and half of the water by the lake was gone. Yes, half of it was gone, as if it was eliminated by a powerful force. All the mutated human students looked in the direction of the garden in surprise. Sorry, I lost my composure. Jean replied and turned to leave with the document. Jean, go find him. Scott looked at her back and gritted his teeth. Find him and tell him your feelings. Otherwise, you'll live in regret forever. Jean's footsteps paused, but she did not look back and continued to walk forward. Chapter 688. Outside Earth, in the vast, dark outer space. Since ancient times, humans had tried every means to explore space. Unfortunately, in 1999, even if some superpowers had developed spaceships and space stations, the most humans could do was explore the moon. The outer space was a forbidden zone for humans. At this moment, far away from Earth, 1,000 kilometers away from the Milky Way's sun. In the outer space near the sun, there was a pyramid the size of a mountain, floating in space like a spaceship. The pyramid was big enough that when it appeared in New York City, everyone in New York City could see it. But now, compared to the eternally burning sun next to it, the pyramid was as small as a speck of dust. At the top of the pyramid, on an altar facing the sun, an old man as thin as a match, with hands as dry as chicken claws, exuded a powerful aura. He sat cross-legged on the altar with a translucent protective shield around him, isolating him from the power of the nearby sun. After an unknown amount of time, Apocalypse opened his eyes with a smile on his face. Sure enough, using all my abilities to resist the sun's energy baptism, my innate ability is constantly strengthening. He was very happy. Now, even if he did not absorb and transform the mutant's abilities, he could still increase his strength. But when Apocalypse looked at the sun in front of him, he smiled bitterly. He was once the god of mutants, and now that he had integrated many abilities, his strength was at least 50% stronger than it was a decade ago. But compared to that person, it was nothing. Master should be stronger now. Apocalypse sighed. Even if his strength had increased, he could only survive 1,000 kilometers away from the sun for a long time. But his master could survive directly inside the sun. One had to know. The surface temperature of the sun had reached 6,000 degrees Celsius, and the inner core temperature was an astonishing 15,000 degrees Celsius. Survive inside the sun? Even Apocalypse, who once called himself a god and had many grade A and grade S defensive abilities, did not dare to think about it. But his master, Caesar, had stayed inside the sun for a full 3 years. If he had not seen his master enter the sun and come out alive, Apocalypse would have thought that his master had died. Even so, Apocalypse could not calm down. What kind of existence is my master, a true god? The sun. Inside the raging and burning energy, there was the naked and perfect body of a young man. He was curled up into a ball as if he was in a deep sleep. The pores all over his body were like miniature black holes, devouring and absorbing the vigorous energy of the sun and strengthening his superhuman body through the energy conversion field in his body. It was indescribable with words. The current strength of Superman's body could easily withstand the high temperature of the sun with just a strand of his hair. Suddenly, the golden-haired youth opened his eyes in the sun, and then his body moved, instantly disappearing from the sun. In the blink of an eye, the golden-haired young man had crossed 1,000 kilometers and arrived within the defensive barrier of the pyramid. Tian-Chi was stunned for a moment, thinking that his eyes were playing tricks on him. When he saw the young man in front of him, he immediately cried out in surprise, "Master, you've finally come out. Give me clothes." Caesar smiled helplessly. Unlike the main body, he didn't have venom and card-drawing space to change or extract clothes at will. "I'll take this one." Tian-Chi waved his hand, and with the mutant ability of the manufacturing system, a set of fitting casual clothes covered Caesar's sturdy and strong body. "How long have I been in there?" Caesar asked curiously. Inside the sun, he was constantly absorbing energy, so he couldn't feel the passage of time at all. "Exactly 3 years, Tian-Chi said respectfully. "Another 3 years have passed. Time really flies." Caesar smiled. Tian-Chi couldn't help but ask, how much has Master's strength increased in these 3 years? Caesar pondered for a moment and estimated, my superhuman physique and internal energy have increased by about 10 times. 10 times? Tian-Chi's eyes widened in surprise. Heavens! 10 years ago, Master's body alone was already invincible on Earth. Now it had increased by 10 times? Was there anything in the universe that could hurt him? Tian-Chi asked carefully, Master, you can't sink a continent on Earth with a punch at full strength, right? I've never tried. Caesar shook his head and glanced at Tian-Chi. Why don't you give it a try? Your strength should have increased in recent years. No, please don't. My old bones can't take it. Tian-Chi was scared out of his wits. Eat Master's full-strength punch? Why not let him commit suicide? Maybe he could use his ability to revive himself. All right. How long has it been since I returned to Earth? Caesar looked in the direction of Earth. It's been almost 13 years, Tian-Chi replied with a bow. Then let's go back and take a look. Caesar rubbed his chin and snapped his fingers. We're going back. Tian-Chi was a little surprised. Caesar shrugged. If we don't go back now, I'm afraid I'll devour the sun's energy sooner or later. Tian-Chi smiled wryly. This reason was truly unprecedented and would never be replicated in the future. Caesar and Apocalypse left the pyramid near the sun. Apocalypse used her mutant ability, while Caesar relied on his superhuman body that contained unparalleled energy. The two of them flew side by side toward the distant blue Earth. Near Earth's space. Caesar suddenly stopped and looked at the several large space stations floating nearby. He sighed. Earth's technology is developing fast. They even have a space station after a decade. As if reading his mind, Tian-Chi stopped next to him with a halo of light around his body. He said telepathically, Master, there's something you don't know. Due to the legal recognition of mutants, the birth of some genius mutant scientists has greatly promoted Earth's technological development in recent years. While Caesar was cultivating, Tian-Chi returned to Earth once a year for a short period of time to collect resources and learn about Earth's current development trends. However, without Caesar's order, he would sneak back every time without being discovered by anyone. Caesar nodded slightly. Inside the large space station, an American astronaut in a bloated spacesuit was doing some inspection work. He looked up and saw a young man and an old man floating not far away. He was so scared that he almost collapsed. Caesar waved his hand and greeted him. Then, he moved at a speed that exceeded human dynamic vision and disappeared without a trace along with Tian-Chi. He had completely entered Earth. Is it a man or a ghost? The astronaut's mouth was wide open. He then returned to the cabin screaming. This became Earth's biggest mystery in the future. Chapter 689. Ever since the war between normal people and mutated humans ended, the world seemed to have returned to a long-lost peace. In New York City, where the economy was growing day by day, there was an endless stream of people on the busy streets. A tall and handsome young man and a skinny old man were walking through the crowd. No matter how crowded it was, there seemed to be an invisible air current around them that subtly separated the crowd into two sides. The pedestrians didn't notice this. Even if they did, the mysterious young man and old man had already disappeared into the crowd after a brief moment of distraction. The only one who could do this was the old servant, Apocalypse. Superman Caesar was strong, but in reality, other than flying and the X-ray vision of his eyes, he didn't have many special mutant abilities. His strength was attributed to the unlimited potential of his body. Just like how normal people had a limiter, the structure of the limiter itself was a gene. Caesar didn't have a limiter on him. As long as he was alive, he could continuously absorb energy to continuously strengthen his body and strength. Compared to the original Kale's card drawing system, the clone was simpler and more violent. These normal people have no right to touch Master. Apocalypse's eyes narrowed slightly. Under his powerful telekinesis, the oncoming crowd simply took the initiative to make way for them. After passing by them, they returned to normal. Even some of the mutated humans mixed in with them didn't notice that they were temporarily controlled. The cameras on the surrounding streets and buildings also temporarily malfunctioned under the magnetic field interference. Apocalypse's temper was naturally much more restrained than before, but he only admired and revered Caesar. He still looked down on normal people and mutated humans. Therefore, when Apocalypse and Caesar passed by, a strange scene appeared on the busy streets of New York. The dense crowd automatically made way for them, but no one paid attention to Caesar and Apocalypse, who walked to the center of the passage. Even if someone saw them, they would completely forget about them in a trance. It was like a god had descended to the mortal world. Caesar followed Apocalypse around the bustling streets, looking at the new things and changes that had taken place in the past decade. There were recruitment signs and designated areas with the words mutants everywhere. It seemed that the mutants had indeed integrated into the society. Leaving the busy streets, they came to a slightly quieter alley. I didn't expect this bar to still be around. Caesar's eyes lit up as he looked at the corner of the street. There was a retro wooden door. More than 10 years ago, he was the little prince of nightclubs. He could be found in bars and nightclubs all over the world. However, more than 10 years had passed, and many bars had closed or moved away. Let's go in for a drink. Caesar smacked his lips. After taking a few steps forward, he reminded Tianqi, who was behind him, "Don't use your powers casually inside. It's not good to scare people. Also, change the way you address me." "Yes, Master," Tianqi responded instinctively, but under Caesar's glare, he quickly corrected himself, "Master. That's more like it." Caesar nodded. "Please, Master." Tianqi pushed open the wooden door, and Caesar was the first to enter the bar. The interior was dark, and the interior was much more spacious than before. The walls and floor had also been refurbished, but they still retained the retro feel of the past. What Caesar didn't expect was that there were quite a lot of customers inside. Almost all the seats were filled, and most of them were men. When these customers saw Caesar walk in, they all cursed in low voices, "Damn it, another pretty boy has come. It looks like his conditions are much better than mine. The pressure of competition is so great." As expected of the bar beauty. They deliberately lowered their voices, but with Caesar's superhuman physique, he could hear them even if they were a street away. Tianqi followed Caesar in. Compared to the gentle Caesar, his dignified eyes swept over the customers, and they immediately fell silent. It was like a mouse seeing a cat. Caesar walked through the bar corridor and sat down at the bar counter. Tianqi didn't sit, but stood next to him with his back bowed. "Customers?" A pleasant voice rang out, and a small figure walked out of the kitchen. Seeing the bartender girl, Caesar suddenly understood why this bar was overcrowded with male customers. It was a girl of only 16 years old. She was still in school, and her facial features were delicate and cute. Her eyes were big, and her skin was very white. She wore a staff uniform with a small hood covering her golden hair. No wonder she was called the Bar Beauty. Although she was young, the girl in front of him already had the beginnings of a beauty. What do you want?" The cute bartender girl looked up. When she saw Caesar, she was momentarily stunned. When she continued to meet Caesar's gaze, her cheeks flushed red. It had to be said that compared to 10 years ago, Caesar had completely entered the superhuman stage of adulthood. He was a little less immature than when he was a teenager. He was tall and handsome before, and now he was even more flawless. His whole body seemed to be glowing, and he was completely like a female killer. Seeing the bartender girl's shy and cute appearance for the first time, the male customers in the bar couldn't help but let out an unwilling howl in their hearts. Why was there such a big difference between people? 2 glasses of ancient music. Caesar smiled. Ancient music? The bartender girl tilted her head. Her eyes were full of confusion. She had never heard of this name before. Wait a minute. She blushed and hurriedly ran into the kitchen. Caesar wasn't in a hurry. He listened to the conversations of the people within a kilometer. It wasn't gossip, but a small habit caused by his superhuman hearing. It allowed him to listen to the conversations of the locals and obtain enough information to quickly connect with the society that had been out of touch for more than 10 years. Dad, get up. The bartender girl came to the second floor and pulled the old man who was still lying on the sofa. There's a customer outside who wants to drink ancient music. Do we have this wine in our bar? Ancient music? John suddenly woke up and looked at his daughter in surprise. He really ordered ancient music. Yes, does our bar really have this wine? I've never heard of it. The bartender girl wrinkled her nose. We do have it, but it was created by me 10 years ago. It's just that after many revisions to the wine list and the addition of bartenders, we don't have this wine anymore. John chuckled and immediately got up to go downstairs. Maybe it's some old friends from back then. I'll go down now. 10 years ago? Old friends? The bartender girl thought of Caesar's face and quickly dismissed the idea with a red face. How could it be? Caesar was only about 20 years old. It should be the old man next to him. The bartender girl thought for a moment and quickly followed John's footsteps. I'd like to see who wants to drink ancient music. John had just arrived at the bar when he saw Caesar sitting at the bar and smiling at him. A look of shock suddenly appeared on his face. He was so excited that his mouth trembled slightly. You are. Caesar put a finger in front of his lips. John Sr. nodded knowingly and laughed with tears in his eyes. How could he forget? Caesar used to be a regular here a long time ago. When the bar first opened, some people from the underworld had trampled on it many times. In the end, it was the childlike Caesar who solved all the problems. Not to mention, Caesar later became a legend in the world. More than 10 years ago, when he last saw Caesar, he was already very tall. Now, he was just a little more mature, so John recognized him at a glance. Long time no see, John. Caesar smiled. I'm back again. Chapter 690. At the bar counter of a vintage and tasteful bar. Hardadef solemnly took out a dozen or so mixing bottles. Although his movements were a little stiff, he still skillfully began the mixing process of ancient music. The bartender girl stood to the side in incomparable surprise. She looked at her father who hadn't mixed for a long time, and then stole a glance at the handsome young man sitting at the bar. Her cute face blushed and shrank back. 5 minutes later. It's done. Hardadef exhaled softly. He wiped the sweat on his forehead with the handkerchief the bartender girl handed him. He placed a glass of mixed wine in front of Caesar and another glass on the table in front of Tian-Chi. Please have a taste, sir. I haven't mixed for a long time. I'm a little rusty. Hardadef looked at Caesar in awe. I'll try it. Caesar picked up the glass, shook it slightly, and then took a sip. His eyes lit up slightly, and he simply raised his head and drank the wine in one gulp. He put down the glass with a smile. Not bad at all. It's the same taste from more than a decade ago. Hardadef smiled happily and looked at Tian-Chi. Old sir, you should try it too. Tian-Chi ignored him and looked at Caesar. You should give it a try, Caesar said with a smile. Yes, master. Tian-Chi took a step forward and took the glass. He took a sip and softly commented, I didn't think that the craft of mixing wine would get better and better. It's just that it's still a little lacking compared to the fine wine that was offered to me in the past. Hearing Tian Chi belittle her father's wine, the bartender girl said indignantly, "Old grandpa, who are you? Offering a tribute." Shirley Hardedef was shocked. These words couldn't be spoken carelessly. Especially the one who followed Caesar, and at such an old age, it was very likely that he was the one who almost destroyed the world back then. That old man had lived for who knows how long, received offerings from all over the world, and tasted countless wines. His evaluation was naturally reasonable. Tian Chi put the glass back on the table. He didn't mind. If it was in the past, with his violent temper, he would have killed everyone in this city. But now, he was just a servant next to his master. Everything he did was for his master's benefit. Uncle John. So you have a daughter. Why didn't I know before? Caesar smiled and looked at the bartender girl beside John. Her name is Shweli, John replied with a smile and looked at the bartender girl lovingly. She had always been in her hometown. It was only in recent years that I brought her to New York to study. She would replace the bartender and help out here from time to time. She may be young, but she's much better at mixing drinks than I am. Feeling Caesar's gaze, Shirley shyly lowered her head. She clenched her fists, almost burying her head in her chest. I don't see you being so shy. John looked at her in surprise. Dad. Shirley stomped her foot and almost hid in the kitchen, but she didn't want to leave the front desk. You. John looked at his daughter, who was different from usual. He finally realized something and sighed deeply in his heart. Caesar continued drinking and chatting with John from time to time. Suddenly, Apocalypse behind him whispered, "Master, a few mutants are coming." Caesar nodded and didn't pay much attention to it. With a bang, the wooden door of the bar was kicked open. 3 non-mainstream youths with dyed hair, earrings, and punk-style clothes walked into the bar arrogantly, causing the customers inside to look at them in shock. It's them again. Shirley was like a frightened rabbit and quickly hid behind John. John's face didn't look too good either. But when he saw Caesar and Apocalypse at the table, he felt relieved and touched Shirley's hair. "We're from the Band of Brothers. If you don't want to die, get out of here." The red-haired young man glanced around at the customers in the bar and chuckled. He stretched out his left hand from his trouser pocket and lit up a metal lighter. Suddenly, a large ball of flame rose from his right hand, causing the temperature of the air in the bar to rise. The customers in the bar all paled and stood up. They left their seats and left through the wooden door behind the 3 young men. Not long after, the originally lively bar was now empty. Only John and his daughter, Caesar, Apocalypse, and the 3 new mutants were left. A bunch of cowards. Shirley spat. But she knew she couldn't blame the customers. The 3 mutants were very strong. Even if the army and organization that controlled the mutants came, they wouldn't be able to handle them. Shirley, who was hiding behind John, sneaked a glance at Caesar, who was sitting motionlessly on the bar. While she admired and appreciated him, she also wanted Caesar to leave with the customers. "Boss Aaron, there are 2 more." The 2 mutated youths next to the burning man Aaron Stanford looked coldly at Caesar and Apocalypse. "A young man and an old man. Don't you understand human language?" Aaron took a step forward and the flame on his right hand burned brighter. "Boss, don't be angry. Just leave these small fries to us." The mutant on the left smiled. Even his face and body were covered in gray spikes. He looked like a human-shaped hedgehog. "Yeah, we'll do it." The mutant on the right smiled. His body suddenly expanded. His body and clothes turned into brown rock. He looked like a stone man. The hedgehog man and the stone man persuaded Aaron and walked forward. John's face was bitter. He shouted, "Didn't you want to collect protection fees? How much do you want? I'll give it to you." "Oh, old man, you agreed so easily this time." The hedgehog man grinned. His eyes fell on Caesar and Apocalypse, who had their backs to them. But rules are rules. We said to clear the place, but they didn't leave. This is not in line with the rules of our company. If we let them go this time, how can we maintain our prestige? The stone man agreed. Just as the two were about to continue forward, Shirley suddenly walked out from behind John. Her face was red. She summoned her courage and shouted, "They're not guests." She pointed at Caesar and Apocalypse. "This is my boyfriend. That's my grandfather. They're from our bar." "Oh." The hedgehog man and the stone man looked at each other. Then, they looked meaningfully at Aaron Stanford behind them. Aaron's expression was extremely ugly. He looked coldly at Caesar. "Teach him a lesson for me." "Yes." The hedgehog man and the stone man walked toward Caesar. "Master." Apocalypse didn't turn around. He looked at Caesar questioningly. "Don't kill him." Caesar took a sip of wine and said softly, "Yes." Apocalypse nodded respectfully. He didn't do anything, but a cold white light flashed in his eyes. Then, the hedgehog man and the stone man who were approaching them were sent flying backward as if they had been attacked by some unknown force. Bam! Two silhouettes flew past him while screaming. Alan was dumbfounded. He looked back and saw that half of the hedgehog man's spikes were broken. He was lying against the sunken wall, covered in blood. One of the stone man's arms was broken. His stone skin was cracked and sunk deep into the wall. Both of them were seriously injured and lost consciousness. Instant kill. A true instant kill. Chapter 691. Looking at his two severely injured companions on the ground, Fireman Aaron's handsome face turned ugly. "You deserve to die." Following the anger in his heart, the flame in his right hand grew bigger and bigger, causing the temperature in the bar to rise. "Old thing, so you're also a mutant. Turn into ashes." Aaron roared and pushed his right hand forward. The flame in his hand turned into an explosive fireball and blasted towards Tian-Chi, who still had his back to him. "Too young." Tian-Chi shook his head and still didn't do anything. The flame was blocked by a protective shield about half a meter away from his thin and short body. Then, it was extinguished at a speed visible to the naked eye. His protective shield could even block the high temperature of the sun's surface, let alone a small flame like this. "This is impossible." Aaron looked at Tian-Chi in disbelief. Then, using his hands, he condensed a large fireball and blasted it forward. Under John and Shirley's shocked gasps, the fireball that was big enough to burn down the entire bar was crushed by Tian-Chi's withered hand. Sparks flew out from between his fingers. "This." Aaron's face was extremely pale. He had always been proud and arrogant with the powerful mutant ability to control fire. But now, facing the old man in front of him, his heart was filled with a deep sense of powerlessness. "Who are you people?" Aaron's face turned green and white. He ignored his companions who were still in the room and suddenly turned to flee towards the bar's exit. "Did I say you could leave?" Tian-Chi pointed a finger at Aaron, and after taking a few steps, Aaron's body froze in place like a statue. "Come here." Tian-Chi waved his hand and Aaron was pulled over by a mysterious force. Tian-Chi grabbed the back of Aaron's neck and lifted him up like a little chick. You. Aaron's teeth chattered. He opened his mouth but couldn't speak. His body was limp. It was too scary. He couldn't fight back at all. This was the first time he had encountered a mutant like this. And until now, he hadn't figured out what mutant ability this old man used. "Master, he's been subdued." Tian-Chi lifted Aaron, who was half paralyzed, on the ground and turned to speak respectfully to Caesar. "Master? Such a terrifying existence was just a hired thug?" Alan was doubting his life. Looking at the young Caesar, he couldn't believe that he had fallen into such a situation. Shirley had never imagined that the three people who seemed like powerful demons to her would be as weak as babies in the hands of the old man next to Caesar. This made her look at Caesar even more brightly and passionately. She was just short of carving love into her eyes. John, on the other hand, was unperturbed. He knew Caesar's identity and guessed the identity of the old man beside him. He knew that the band of brothers had kicked an iron plate this time. No, it should be said that they kicked a mountain. I'll ask and you'll answer. Caesar took a sip of wine and looked sideways at Alan. Are you from the company of brothers? Why yes. Aaron's mouth was a little dry. He felt that if he didn't answer well or showed even a trace of disrespect, Tianchi would crush his neck at any moment. Caesar looked at him in surprise. Since when did the company of brothers fall into such a small organization that collects protection fees? The company of brothers was originally created by Magneto to fight for the ideals of a better future for the mutants. The internal mutants were all conceited and independent, and they had always suppressed the X-Men created by Charles. He didn't expect that the current members would come out to collect protection fees. Alan was silent and didn't know what to say. Sir, there's something you don't know. John said softly from the bar. 10 years ago, since the government introduced a law to recognize mutants, and the public gradually accepted mutants, the main members of the company of brothers basically left, leaving only a few who reorganized the current company of brothers. It is also the largest mutant mafia in New York. Oh, Eric is not in the company of brothers? Caesar asked casually. John nodded. Yes. I heard that he has retired, and no one knows his whereabouts and whereabouts. Alan looked at Caesar blankly. Of course, he knew who Eric was. He was the former president who created the company of brothers and one of the strongest mutants in the world. But everyone would call him Magneto, and only the current youth would call him by his name. Who is your current president? Caesar continued to ask. It's the Archangel. Alan's words were respectful, but he also thought that they would let him go after hearing the name of the Archangel. Archangel? Caesar looked at Apocalypse with a strange expression. Remember that the Archangel was a former servant of Apocalypse? His servant? Caesar drank the wine in his glass, looked at Alan, and whispered, I don't care what the company of brothers rules are now. In the future, this place will be under my Caesar's protection. If you dare to come here again, I don't mind letting Apocalypse go over and destroy you. Caesar, Apocalypse. Hearing these two names, Alan took a deep breath and his hair was numb. He finally remembered that there were two people who surpassed the ranks of mutants more than 10 years ago. They were taboo existences. Here's Gulu and the money for the damaged items in the bar. Caesar placed a few large dollar bills on the counter and stood up, heading straight for the door. Let's go, Apocalypse. Yes, master. Apocalypse casually tossed Alan aside, and Alan was immediately sent flying. He knocked over a table before slamming heavily into the wall. His eyes rolled back, and he fainted. After reluctantly sending off Caesar and Apocalypse, Shirley looked at the money on the table before looking at Hardadef beside her. Dad, take it. That mister doesn't lack money, Hardadef said with a smile, the company of brothers won't dare to harass us again in the future. Is it because of that Mr. Caesar? Shirley asked with a red face as she held the dollar bills in her hand and felt the lingering warmth from them. Yes. A single word from him is more useful than anything else, Hardadef sighed emotionally. A while after Kaya and Apocalypse left, the wooden door was pushed open again. A young man wearing strange sunglasses and a woman with wild silver hair entered the bar lobby. It was Radiation Eye Scott and Storm Girl Haley who had rushed over from the Academy for Gifted Youngsters. The two were teachers of the Mutants Academy and members of the X-Men. What happened here? Scott glanced at the messy bar and the three members of the company of brothers who had fallen on the ground and asked in surprise. "You're a little late." "The matter here has been resolved," Hardadef replied with a smile as he recognized the two of them. "Who is it?" "It seems that they easily took care of Pyro, Rock, and Hedgehog." Haley frowned. If a mutant that was not to be trifled with appeared in New York, it would be troublesome. "It's Mr. Caesar." Hardadef smiled. "What did you say?" Scott and Haley were stunned at the same time. For a moment, they suspected that they had heard wrong. Hardadef said again, "Superman, the god of mutants, Mr. Caesar." Chapter 692. It was late at night. A cold air suddenly invaded downtown New York, and then snow suddenly fell from the sky. For a while, New York turned into a vast expanse of white, and the street lights glowed with a dim yellow warm light. The pedestrians on the road were hurrying back home. Caesar, who was wearing a long black trench coat, was homeless. He walked silently on the deserted streets of New York, and Apocalypse, who was like an old man, bowed and followed him faithfully and silently. Before the snowflakes fell on the two of them, they would automatically evaporate and dissipate. "Master, where do you want to go next?" Apocalypse asked hoarsely. Caesar didn't answer and continued to pace slowly. He really didn't know where he should go. He didn't belong to this world. Although he had lived here for decades, he had always been a rootless duckweed. He had no home, no family, and it was the same wherever he went. Caesar used to go to bars all over the world to have fun. Now that fun was gone, he only had to become stronger. But he was so strong that no one on earth could beat him. He was so strong that he surpassed his previous self, and there was no real meaning in becoming stronger. Boring. It was really boring. Now, the only thought that supported him to live in this X-Men world was to return to the Marvel world. Caesar exhaled softly. He suddenly thought of a person, the only person he cared about in this X-Men universe. Let's go to the Academy for Gifted Youngsters," Caesar said softly. The next moment, he and Apocalypse disappeared from the streets of New York at the same time. No one noticed or perceived their existence, and even the cameras around them were disturbed. On the snowy road, there were only 2 lines of footprints that were suddenly interrupted, and they were quickly covered by snow. It was 11:00 at night. Outskirts of New York, Academy for Gifted Youngsters. It was late at night and it was snowing. There were not many students in the school, and they all returned to the dormitory to sleep. On the 5th floor of the main teaching building, in the principal's office. This was the principal's office, and next to it was the principal's dormitory. But now, the principal's office was still lit. A bald middle-aged man was sitting in a special wheelchair. He leaned against the window, and the fire next to him crackled as he looked down at the quiet campus under the heavy snow. A figure suddenly appeared behind him and draped a coat over his body. "Headmaster, it's time to rest," Red Devil Azazo said to the bald man. "Yes." Charles nodded lightly and looked deeply at the schoolyard. He suddenly smiled and said, "That day was also a quiet night like this. Ruewan and Caesar broke into my home and my life at the same time. At that time, I was only about 10 years old. Now, I'm almost old." When Charles talked about the past, his eyes would always narrow, and his face would have a gentle and nostalgic expression. "We're all old." Azo smiled. He stood straight and wore a gentleman's suit, but his hair was white. "Caesar is probably the only one who is still the same." Charles sighed. "Now that I think about it, I haven't seen him for 12 years. I wonder how he is now." "Master, you will always be at the top." Azo's words were filled with unconcealable respect. Charles nodded. "Okay, you go and rest first. I'll sleep after sitting for a while." "Okay." Azo turned into a red flame and disappeared in the room. Charles continued to look at the scenery outside the window in a daze. After a while, the sound of footsteps came from the room behind him again. "Azo, why are you back?" Charles looked sideways and was suddenly stunned. His words stopped abruptly, and his squinted eyes suddenly widened as if he saw something unbelievable. "Hi, Charles." The young and handsome blonde youth raised his hand to greet him, just like when they met when they were children. "Kai, Caesar." Charles entered his old body and suddenly brimmed with the spirit and vitality of a young man. He looked at Caesar excitedly, then took a long breath and scolded with a smile, "I thought I wouldn't be able to see you again before I die. You still have a long way to go." Caesar could see at a glance that although Charles's body was old and lacked vitality, his spirit was close to God. Even if he changed his body, he could still continue to live. "With your mutated ability, I can teach you how to take another person's body and live in the world forever." Tian-Chi walked out from behind Caesar, a smile on his wrinkled face. Tian-Chi. Charles's pupils shrank slightly, and he looked cautiously at the old man behind Caesar. He smiled bitterly. "Forget it. It's good enough that I can live through this life." His mind moved, and he looked at Caesar. "You didn't come here just to see me, did you? What do you think?" Caesar glanced at him. Charles said leisurely, "In the second female dormitory, in the single room on the right side of the third floor." "Do I need you to tell me?" Caesar's body moved, and he disappeared from the room. He left behind a sentence. "Tian-Chi, help me watch Charles. This old thing likes to peek at people with his mind." "Yes, master." Tian-Chi stared at Charles. Charles smiled bitterly. "When did I? That was when I was young." Female dormitory, inside the personal room Charles had pointed to. The door was closed, but the window was open. Bright moonlight and white snow fell on the windowsill. On the large pink bed, her long red hair was spread out like a flower. A beautiful woman was lying quietly on the bed. Just sleeping was an extremely beautiful picture. Her brows were slightly furrowed, and her subtle but powerful mind unconsciously wandered around the room. Caesar's movements were so fast that it was as if he had teleported, and he appeared in the room without any warning. The spiritual force, which was used against all outsiders, fell silent in front of him, as if it had lost its effect. Instead, it rippled and flowed intimately around him. "I didn't think that in addition to replacing my main body and meeting Carter Page during World War II, I would have to secretly meet my own disciple like this." Caesar smiled bitterly in his heart. When his gaze fell on the woman on the bed, he couldn't move his eyes away. Jean was wearing simple, tight-fitting pajamas. Due to the spiritual protection, even the cold air outside could not enter, let alone creatures. Therefore, she only covered herself with a thin blanket, but her body was not completely covered. Her curvaceous body was exposed, and there were some parts of her body that were even more seductive. They hadn't seen each other for 12 years. The shy little loli who stuck to him back then had unexpectedly become a mature beauty with long legs and fair skin. Little Phoenix had finally grown up. Caesar sighed in his heart. He came to the bed and sat down, pulling up a corner of the blanket and gently covering himself. Jean showed no signs of waking up. Instead, when Caesar came closer, her frowning brows relaxed like never before, and she fell asleep peacefully. Caesar looked at Jean like this for a long time. After a long time, he suddenly stood up again. It was time to leave. He had to leave sooner or later. After all, he wasn't from here. Caesar turned around and was about to leave the female dormitory. At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded, like thunder exploding in his ears. "Teacher." The wind and snow outside became even heavier at this time. Chapter 693. Teacher. Chin's voice sounded in the room without warning. Caesar's heart skipped a beat. Following the familiar call that he had not heard for a long time, he turned around, only to find that Jean was still lying on the bed, showing no sign of waking up. "Teacher." Jean continued to murmur softly. It turned out that she was talking in her sleep. Caesar felt a little relieved but also a little disappointed. It was as if a bottle of mixed feelings had been knocked over in his heart. But this was for the best. "Sleep well, Jean. This time, we'll really meet again." Caesar took one last look at the sleeping Jean. His body shook and he disappeared from the room as if he had teleported. The snowstorm outside was getting heavier and heavier. No one knew how much time had passed. "Teacher, don't leave me," Jean shouted unconsciously. She suddenly opened her beautiful eyes. She was greatly frightened as if she had a nightmare. Her upper body straightened from the bed. Jean's pretty face was pale. She blankly glanced around the dormitory, then patted her towering chest and bitterly muttered to herself with lingering fear, "So, it was just a dream." A teardrop overflowed from her left eye, streaked across her face, and dripped onto the bed. "Huh?" Jean touched her face in a daze. This was just the beginning. Then, the second and third teardrops fell on the bed like pearls on a string, continuously dripping onto the bed. "What's wrong with me?" Tears streamed down Jean's face. She couldn't suppress the great grief in her heart. After seeing Jean, Caesar left the academy for gifted youngsters with Apocalypse that night despite Charles's repeated urging. This was not a place where they should stay. Except for Charles, no one knew that Caesar had come here tonight and left in a hurry. No one knew where Caesar and Apocalypse would go next. However, Charles had a feeling that this might be the last time he and Caesar would see each other. Berlin, Germany, deep in the mountains on the outskirts of the city. In the dense forest, there was a retro villa. Due to the inconvenient transportation, few people knew that the strongest mutant family on Earth lived here. "Mom, can you help me find a razor? I don't know where I put it." Quicksilver, whose hair was like a hornet's nest and whose beard was unkempt, was in the bathroom, brushing his teeth while mumbling incoherently. "Ask your father for help. It's more convenient for him to find metal," replied the woman who was cleaning the room. "I'm not free at the moment." "Aren't you very fast? Look for it yourself. It won't take long." Eric was half lying on the sofa in the hall on the first floor. His hair was already stained with the marks of age. He happily played with his 6-year-old daughter, Anya, who was sitting in his arms. No one would believe that this was the supervillain Magneto who founded the strongest mutant organization and plotted to assassinate the President of the United States, causing countless people to tremble in fear. "You're already in your 30s, yet you still live so casually." The woman complained to Quicksilver, then smiled and said, "Wanda and Lorna go to the city junior high school. It seems that they have a holiday today. They should come back for lunch." As soon as she finished speaking, the doorbell of the villa suddenly rang. "They're back so soon?" Eric looked at the door in confusion. He was about to use his magnetic field control ability to open the door, but Anya clamored to open the door for her sister. She broke free from his arms and rushed to the door in slippers. Anya's little hand couldn't reach the door handle. She puffed up her cheeks angrily and stood on tiptoe with difficulty. Only then did she barely touch the door handle. Ka-cha, the door opened. "Sister." Anya raised her hands forward, but quickly stopped. It was not her sister Anya standing at the door, but a tall blonde young man and a slightly hunchbacked thin old man. Facing the strange but incomparably friendly blonde young man, Anya still raised her hands. "Hug." Caesar smiled, lowered his body, held little Anya in his arms, and stepped into the villa hall. "It's you, Mentor Caesar and Master Apocalypse." Eric stood up from the sofa in shock when he saw Caesar and Anya. "Why, Eric, don't you welcome us?" Caesar blinked at him. "Of course not. Eric smiled and said sincerely, I just didn't expect that you, who had disappeared for so long, would suddenly come to me. He had always been grateful to Caesar. Without Caesar, how could there be a society where mutants and ordinary people coexisted peacefully? How could he retreat and live a happy retirement for more than 10 years? A gust of wind blew from the bathroom to the hall on the first floor. Wow, it's really Mr. Caesar. I really missed you. Quicksilver stopped in front of Caesar and couldn't help but hug him. As a result, Anya wrinkled her nose and raised her white tender hand in disgust. Don't come over, brother. Quicksilver took a few steps back in embarrassment. Caesar looked down at little Anya, looked at Quicksilver, and said to Eric, I didn't expect it either. Quicksilver, you will live with Eric. Also, Eric, you have a daughter. More than one. A smile appeared on Eric's face. Just then, there was the sound of a key unlocking the door. Immediately afterward, the door was violently kicked open. The corner of Eric's mouth twitched, and Quicksilver drooped down and moaned weakly. The two witches are back. Caesar looked back and saw two little Lolas about 11 years old standing at the door, looking straight at him. Both Lolas were very cute and beautiful. Their appearance and silhouettes were very similar, and their style of dress was generally similar. They wore colorful stockings on their legs, had lollipops in their mouths, and carried schoolbags of the same size. The only obvious difference was that the one on the left had long red hair, and the one on the right had short dark green hair. After the two Lolas opened the door, their eyes quickly fell on Caesar and little Anya in his arms, and their eyes suddenly narrowed sharply. Who are you? You are carrying my little sister. Maybe a human trafficker, do you want to do it? Don't talk nonsense. Eric hurriedly stopped his two precocious daughters and introduced them to Caesar with a little embarrassment. These two are also my daughters, almost 12 years old. The one on the left is called Wanda, and the one on the right is called Lorna. They are twins, and they just came back from school in the city during the holidays. After hearing these familiar names, Caesar was stunned for a moment, but he quickly recovered. Sure enough. Although they were in different worlds and their lives were completely different, they would still appear in the same family after all. Dad. Are you just going to reveal my information? Don't tell me you are going to sell your daughters. Lorna snorted softly. Wanda immediately suggested, he should sell his daughters to Quicksilver, he is not young anymore. The two Lolas echoed each other, making Quicksilver unable to refute and slumped down on the sofa. Caesar was dumbfounded. He didn't expect that in his original world of Marvel, Quicksilver, the youngest, would become the firstborn boss here. Incredible. Apocalypse, who had been silent next to him, suddenly spoke. Apocalypse looked at Magneto Eric's children, and a faint light appeared in his eyes. They are all good seedlings with top mutant genes. Your descendants are far better than you, Eric. Master Apocalypse, you. Eric was startled, thinking that Apocalypse wanted to return to his old business. He looked at Caesar for help, and Caesar nodded to reassure him. Don't worry, I am just lamenting. Since I have followed Master, I have no need to seize mutant abilities. Apocalypse smiled and continued to lower his eyes. Chapter 694. In the dining room on the first floor of the villa. Magneto Eric's family, as well as Caesar and Apocalypse, who were guests, filled the wooden dining table. You guys eat first, I'll continue to make some dishes. It was rare for guests to come here, so Eric's wife, Mrs. Nina, enthusiastically displayed her cooking skills in the kitchen. They just sat in their seats, facing the steaming dishes in front of them. The two Lolas, Wanda and Lorna, held knives and forks in their hands, and their feet that couldn't touch the ground swung back and forth. They didn't start eating, but stared straight at Caesar and Apocalypse, as if they were looking at strange uncles who kidnapped children. For more than 10 years. This was the first time that someone came to visit, so they were naturally curious about the origin of the two. Caesar and Apocalypse were very natural and didn't stand on ceremony at all. They began to enjoy the delicious food on the table as if it was their own home. Eric held his fourth child, little Anna, and put a napkin around her neck. Quicksilver, who was sitting on the side, didn't speak. He lowered his head the whole time, almost burying his face in the plate, and ate slowly at the speed of ordinary people. Something's wrong. Wanda's eyes narrowed into a crescent shape, and she suddenly said in a crisp voice. Something's really wrong. Lorna nodded, and together with Wanda, they both looked at Quicksilver. Brother, why are you eating so slowly this time? Ahem. Quicksilver almost choked on the food in his mouth and coughed violently. He looked at Caesar and Apocalypse, and then said matter-of-factly, I don't usually eat like this. Is that so? Wanda and Lorna's faces were even more suspicious. Usually, Quicksilver finished eating in less than half a second. Quicksilver smiled bitterly and continued to eat politely and slowly. This time, there were two big shots, Caesar and Apocalypse, here, so he didn't dare to eat so fast. One was the man who took away his title of the fastest, and the other was the first mutant who almost ruled the world for the second time. The two of them represented the peak combat power of the Earth, and there was no one else. If the leaders of this country were here, they would also be frightened. Of course. For Caesar, Quicksilver also respects him very much. Hey, what's your name? Lorna looked at Caesar curiously. Mind your manners. Eric pulled a long face and glared at his daughter. Call me uncle. Lorna snorted softly and said angrily, What uncle? Look at his age, he's not much older than us. That's right, that's right. Wanda curled her lips and chimed in. A trace of helplessness appeared on Eric's face. According to seniority, Caesar was even older than his uncle. Looking at his two daughters who were unwilling to accept the title, Eric could only apologize and hurriedly said to Caesar, I'm sorry. Caesar, you spoil them too much. I'm fine. Caesar smiled faintly. With two such willful daughters, it seemed that Eric had completely washed his hands of gold. Probably no one would have thought of it. The man who dared to assassinate the current president of the United States and created a mutant force to subvert the world had now become a stay-at-home father who was suppressed by his daughter and had to personally feed his younger daughter. From this, it could be seen that the world had really changed. You're Caesar? Wanda looked at Caesar and frowned slightly. Why do I feel like I've heard this name somewhere before? Me too. The name Caesar. Lorna also muttered to herself. Caesar ignored them and continued to elegantly cut the steak. When he was young, in the eyes of others, he seemed to be even more reckless and naughty than them. This was a sign of having special superpowers. If you wanted a talented mutant to deliberately act like an ordinary child, it would instead be on the wrong path to growth. After a while, Wanda and Lorna's eyes lit up at the same time. They looked at each other and then looked at Caesar again. They hurriedly asked, You're not that Caesar, are you? The strongest superhuman in the world? You only thought of it now? Quicksilver muttered. Apart from the current Caesar, who would dare to come to his house as a guest without first applying? Under the passionate gazes of the two Lolas, Caesar nodded lightly. Superhuman. I think someone called me that before. That was a rather long history. Whoosh, Wanda and Lorna's expressions instantly changed. As if they were facing their idol, their eyes widened and shone with bright stars. The legendary superhuman came to my house as a guest. Wanda was in disbelief. Lorna clenched her fists in excitement and waved them vigorously. Did you know? You're the idol of our school, no, the mutant community. What do you mean? Caesar raised his eyebrows slightly. He was also interested to know what he was like in the legends. Wanda and Lorna's faces flushed with excitement. They chattered and explained, legend has it that you only fought twice. Once, you defeated the leader of the largest mutant organization that had gone astray with one punch. You reversed society's perception of us mutants. And once, you defeated a supervillain that almost destroyed the world and saved. Listening to their innocent discussion, Quicksilver made a pft sound. Fortunately, he quickly covered his mouth, otherwise, he would have spat out the food in his mouth. Seeing Wanda and Lorna look over, Quicksilver waved his hand awkwardly. It's nothing. I couldn't help it. Eric's face was a bit dark. Apocalypse, on the other hand, was happy. He didn't mind his dark history. After all, that was his encounter with the Lord. That's nothing. Caesar picked up his wine glass and took a sip. He teased, those two weren't that hard to beat. Wanda and Lorna's gazes became even more heated. They looked at Caesar and said in unison, "Superhuman, please accept us as your disciples." Eric coughed and said in a low voice, "Okay. You still have to go back to school after the holidays. This holiday is 2 months long." Wanda wrinkled her nose. "Promise us." Lorna looked at Caesar expectantly. Looking at the two little Lolas in front of him, Caesar was dazed for a moment. He couldn't help but think of Jean back then. He drank the wine in his glass and said with a smile, "I won't accept any more disciples. I'm not suitable to be a teacher." Wanda and Lorna immediately lowered their heads in disappointment. But Caesar changed the topic and looked at the two Lolas seriously. "If you really want to be apprenticed, the servant next to me is more suitable." He wasn't a mutant, let alone a human. No one knew mutant abilities better than Apocalypse. Him? Wanda and Lorna looked at the old man sitting next to Caesar and bickered disapprovingly. Quicksilver almost choked to death on the wine. This was Apocalypse. Other than the freak Caesar, who could be stronger than him? Now, even if they were to be Apocalypse's servants, they would be willing to be his brothers and even the president of a country. Chapter 695. Ever since Caesar and Apocalypse, master and servant, came to Magneto's house as guests, in addition to the previous villa, there was a new golden holy pyramid not far away in the mountains and forests here. Magneto's twin daughters, Wanda and Lorna, had both become Apocalypse's disciples. Apocalypse would use the summer vacation to teach them how to develop and use their powerful abilities. Caesar also temporarily stayed here. In any case, the pyramid created by Apocalypse's mutant ability had a grotto heaven inside, which was equivalent to a huge ancient castle. As for the 3 meals a day, they were provided by Magneto's house, and Quicksilver was the errand boy to deliver the daily meals. Just like that, a week passed in the blink of an eye. Even though Caesar and Tian-Chi didn't have any specific concept or feeling of time. After all, the Kryptonian bloodline and physique were resistant to aging. As for Apocalypse, although he was old, he was already a few thousand years old. Even if he lived for another 1,000 years, he still wouldn't die. Their genes were truly different from ordinary people's, and they were not in the category of humans in essence. This morning, it was cloudy. The cold wind was blowing, and dark clouds accumulated above the forest, showing signs of impending rain. But at this time, on the open-air square at the top of the pyramid, they didn't care about the weather at all. "Master, I did it!" Wanda shouted happily as she raised her white and tender hands. A red mist of energy could be seen emerging from her body, spreading and lingering with the control of her hands. Not bad. After a week, it can finally be triggered naturally. Apocalypse's old and thin body was hunched, and he nodded cheerfully, looking no different from a kind and amiable old man. "I can do it too." Lorna was fuming. She stared at the metal piece on the ground in front of her, her 5 fingers grasping the air as she concentrated on holding her breath. Soon, the metal piece on the ground floated up, and with her body as the center, it spun a few times. "Yeah." Lorna excitedly made a peace sign. Then, she and Wanda both looked at the altar not far away. They wanted to be praised by someone other than Tianqi. On the altar platform at the top of the pyramid, Caesar was sitting there with his eyes closed. His cold and handsome face was as sharp as a knife. The cold wind poured into his black windbreaker, making him look like a lonely eagle that wanted to be higher than the sky. He was exuding a cold and invincible aura. His existence was the center of this world, the center of the universe. The two little Lolas, who had just mastered their own mutated abilities, stared blankly at Caesar, who was sitting on the altar. They felt that they could not take their eyes off of Caesar. This fatal and mysterious attraction had once exceeded the ordinary feelings between the opposite sex. Wanda couldn't help but ask, "Master, Big Brother Caesar, what is he doing?" Master said that this is to comprehend and absorb the free energy in the universe. All you need to know is that I've searched for thousands of years and still haven't been able to reach such heights. Tianqi sighed. If there really was a god in this world, then he was sure that it was Caesar. Even if it wasn't Caesar, Caesar could easily kill a god. Although he looked like a human, he surpassed everything and even common sense. This was Superman. Caesar suddenly opened his eyes. Just as he woke up, his gaze inadvertently turned into two scorching rays. This gave Tianqi a fright, and he quickly moved Wanda and Lorna away. The two scorching rays swept through the air, leaving two bottomless trenches on the open-air square of the pyramid. Then, the rays continued to sweep out, splitting a mountain directly opposite the pyramid into three. Looking at this shocking scene, both Wanda and Lorna were stunned. Even Quicksilver, who was walking halfway and delivering lunch to everyone, was shocked. He looked at the deep, blackened trench beside him. Ignoring the gravity constraints of the earth, Caesar got up from the altar and floated in the air. His bright eyes flickered. He suddenly clenched his right fist and slowly punched towards the sky. Boom! Like a sudden clap of thunder, Caesar's punch caused the surrounding air to explode. The power of the punch spread upwards through the air, but it did not stop completely. Instead, it was like a flood that had broken through a dam and was spilling out. The dark clouds that had accumulated in the sky above the forest in the suburbs within a radius of tens of kilometers were directly shattered, turning the gloomy sky into a sunny day in an instant. The bright and beautiful sunlight shone down without any hindrance, freely sprinkling on the pyramid below. This is too exaggerated. Quicksilver's mouth was wide enough to stuff an egg in. Just now, it was just a normal punch from Master. He didn't use his full strength. Tianqi revealed a knowing smile and shook his head gently. If he used his full strength, even if he was there, Wanda and Lorna, who were nearby, would be injured by the shock of the punch if they weren't careful. Under the godlike gaze of Wanda and Lorna, Caesar fell back to the altar platform. His eyes were a little confused, and then he sighed helplessly. He failed again. During this time, Caesar had been tired of absorbing energy to strengthen himself. Instead, he began to try and think about the possibility of breaking through the spacetime of this world. Back then, he broke through the constraints of the Marvel Universe through the technology of the Ant-Man domain, through the quantum domain, and inadvertently came to the X-Men universe here. Since he could come from there, there was no reason why he couldn't return. Caesar didn't have the PIM particles now, so he couldn't enter the quantum domain again and use the microscopic method to break through spacetime. But under the macro premise, was it impossible to break through the constraints of this world's spacetime? Caesar had been thinking about this problem for more than 10 years, and occasionally argued with Tianqi. In the end, he came to a conclusion. As long as he had enough power to break through the power of this world, there was a possibility of breaking through the spacetime of this macro universe. Although he came to a relative conclusion, the process of verification was very difficult. Caesar felt that he was strong enough. With one punch, he felt like he could break through spacetime. But it was only at the stage of feeling. He couldn't really break through spacetime that didn't exist. He could only break through specific things in reality. I keep feeling that I'm missing something. What is it? Caesar frowned, sat down cross-legged, and continued to fall into a long period of thought. At this time, in a classroom of the Academy for Young Geniuses. Because Storm's word had something to do at the last minute, Jean, who could only act as a substitute teacher, changed into a female teacher's suit and smiled at the girl next to her. Okay, introduce yourself to everyone. Hello everyone, my name is Shirley. I'm a new student, please give me your guidance. A beautiful girl in a jasmine dress, with small dimples on her fair face, stood on the podium of the classroom and bowed slightly. The new students immediately gave loud and enthusiastic applause, and many of the male students couldn't hide their joy. They didn't have a chance with Goddess Jean, who was a teacher, but this new female student was also very beautiful. She could be the prettiest girl in the class. Shirley, do you have a boyfriend? A male student who thought that he was good-looking immediately raised his hand and asked. Under the boos of the students, Shirley smiled. No, but I already have a Prince Charming in my heart, so I'm sorry. Jean was amused by the large number of dispirited male students. She asked softly, what Prince Charming? Shirley blinked and said straightforwardly, Superman, Caesar. You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.